each nation are on different varying levels, right? तो वो वाला सीन है। ये कौन है भाई? अच्छा।
लेकिन इसके अलावा
हम्म।
ये तो चलो इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन को, लेकिन तुम्हारा मिलिट्री जियो स्ट्रेटेजिक लेवल पे क्या होता है वो भी देखना पड़ेगा ना।
वो उसी के लिए तो उसके लिए QSD है, बट
हाँ
दिस इज मोर इकोनॉमिक।
हाँ
This is they've just it is dawned upon them कि भाई we are not making sense economically, our allies are also not making sense, hence we should start this. तो ये गम्मू है, गम्मू ने बोलना था इस पे। Let's see.
वो चला गया यार,
आएगा आएगा जरूर आएगा।
मैं और दूसरे लोगों को पिंग कर देना।
Right, right. The problem with the whole chairing of this thing is that people are just assuming out of the whole blue कि ये देखो दुनिया अब यहाँ फोकस्ड है, इंडो पैसिफिक का ध्यान रखेगी, ये वो बकवास। मेरे को हंसी आ रही थी, एक आई थिंक किसी ने लिखा था, उस कल परसों कोई रूम हुआ था कहीं पे, ठीक है, अबाउट क्वाड एंड चाइना एंड चाइनीज शिल्स गेटिंग स्कैर्ड। The whole room was more about Chinese shills on Clubhouse rather than the whole issue around IPEF and Quad. So it was basically a target room. And there were comments like कि देखो अब तो सारे लोग यहाँ पे आके हमारा सेफगार्ड करेंगे। अबे भाई किसी को फर्क नहीं पड़ता
और
है।
मुझे फंडामेंटल्स तो मेरे तो बहुत खराब है फॉरेन पॉलिसी नॉलेज, बट मुझे फंडामेंटल्स उतना स्ट्रांग नहीं लगता है यार। मतलब ये क्वाड में मतलब किस हद तक जाएगा इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन?
भाई मैं तो बड़ा हॉकिश हूँ उसके।
भाई
मतलब
मैं भी हॉकिश
मेरे
हूँ,
को तो
क्वाड
कोई
इज
उम्मीद
वेरी
नहीं।
अनस्टेबल।
मुझे एक्चुअली पता है, मैं
कोई-
एक्चुअली जब ये रशिया वाला मामला शुरू हुआ ना, तो ये न्यूज देखा कि जापान वाला बंदा आया एंड दे वर प्रॉमिसिंग ह्यूज इन्वेस्टमेंट्स। मतलब लाइक इंडिया वालों, तुम थोड़ा मतलब यूएस का साथ दो, पैसे मिलते हैं तुमको, ठीक है, इन्वेस्टमेंट देंगे हम तुम्हारे को, अच्छा खासा मार्केटिंग होगा। एंड आई एम लाइक यार ये पहले नहीं किया था क्या, आप क्यों कर रहे हो जब रशिया के साथ हम दे रहे तो हैं? तो ये भी एक है ना मतलब।
अच्छा अनहद, ये रूम का साइज बढ़ेगा क्या? क्योंकि फिर मैं अपने पॉइंट्स रखूंगा।
हाँ भाई
तो वही है,
देख ले, तेरी मर्जी। वैसा रिप्लेस ऑन है तो तू पॉइंट रखेगा तो वो रहेंगे
हाँ,
रिकॉर्ड।
हाँ, मैं
मतलब
तो एक
भाई
ही बंदे के साथ मैंने बात की थी एक बार, और वो रिप्ले पता नहीं 100-200 लोगों ने ओवर पीरियड ऑफ 1 मंथ सुन लिया भाई।
सी द इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग अबाउट रिप्लेस ऑन क्लब हाउसेस, बहुत लोग सुनते हैं, ठीक है, सो इट इज बेटर इफ यू पुट इट आउट, पीपल विल लिसन, डजंट मैटर कितने लोग हैं। देख नीचे ऑलरेडी 3 आ गए हैं, तो सुनने वाले आ रहे हैं धीरे धीरे, वही चीज है।
भाई रिसर्च पेपर एक पेपर क्या है, मतलब पूरा रोड मैप है, मैंने तेरे को फॉरवर्ड
हाँ
किया
मैंने
था।
देखा था।
हाँ हाँ, सब मतलब इट्स अ बिट वियर्ड यार। I mean, people forget why, like, you know, Trump pulled out of the Trans-Pacific partnership in the first place here. All those problems um, will be inherited in this framework, even if, you know, I say one thing. I mean, I'll talk about it later, but I say one thing, man. Like, you know, all these things are shortcuts, okay? In life, there are no shortcuts. भाई यार मैन्युफैक्चरिंग लाओ इंडिया में, ठीक है, दैट्स ऑल देयर इज टू इट, ओके? डोंट डू दिस, विल पार्टनर विद दिस एंड पार्टनर विद दैट। bloody change your policies, come up with some innovative solutions, and not just with special economic zones and whatnot. Bring manufacturing here as much as you can attract it. It's a cheap bloody labor situation here, cheaper than everything, every other country in the world. Get manufacturing here, don't rely on other partners. You know, you are a strong pull upon yourself, right? You can pull in that much, like, you know, investment, but policy decisions hone chahiye, and you have to, like, you know, make it relatively easier for businesses to set up shop here. That's what it is about.
मैंने ये चीज़ मेंशन करी थी अपने आर्टिकल में, दैट टू फॉर इंडिया टू शो इटसेल्फ एज एन अल्टरनेटिव टू द चाइनीज opportunity, firstly you need to make policy decisions in a better direction, and then you have to make sure that the members of the quad take this lead. If you want it through quad, अलग से कर रहे हो तो अलग चीज़ है भाई, लेकिन if you're doing it through quad, your partners in the quad need to ensure that they help you in reducing what I call is the Chinese carrot, which is we'll attract you through certain loans and everything, and उसके बाद then you can do whatever you have to. हो सकता है कल को you get a debt, for all we care, we don't have any concerns around that. That is your global policy and your trade policy which is at fault. This is what Chinese have said in Sri Lanka. So to counter that, they are doing well in Maldives and Sri Lanka, but that's not enough. So ज़्यादा करना पड़ेगा.
See, the point here is that if you want to do it, then why would you do it through quad anyway? That's my
वही
point.
ना
Just do it by
वही that
yourself.
is the first
Uh.
criticism I have for quad because it's
Yeah.
so unstable. You never know कल को गवर्नमेंट बदल जाए. देखो क्या हुआ था 2007 में ये शुरू हुआ था. आबे ने शुरू किया था, ठीक है. तब जो वाइस प्रेसिडेंट था यूएस का, who was Dick Cheney was in support of this. But as soon as Obama comes, Obama was like, no, 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 we don't need Quad. We can have good trade relations with the Chinese. We don't give a flying F. तो ये फिर रुक गया. And for 10 years it stayed dormant. कोई मीटिंग कुछ नहीं until Trump came. अरे आयुष is here. So Trump came and Trump restarted Quad. And that is from here it started. And उसके बाद there have been ups and downs. Even क्या कहते हैं यार अपना बाइडन वाज आल्सो नॉट forthcoming, but thanks to the recent development he is a little bit forthcoming now. So anyway, अरे आयुष भाई,
Apparently it's US led,
it is us
quote
led,
unquote.
so us
Yeah,
dictates it.
yeah, but my point is US led or not, quote unquote. By whatever, like most of the countries that are part of, the Quad. I mean the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, not Quad. Um, they are like, most of them are with the RCEP also.
Exactly, that is the problem.
So what the hell is the point of this?
इसीलिए रूम बनाया ना भाई. कल का जो रूम था that
I
was
know.
more about taking on HK and all these guys who are pro Chinese here, rather than actually discussing systematic problems of both QSD, as it was already originally known, and this. So that is why I asked Ayush कि आज हम लोग करते हैं, because quality
मैं
matters,
I
not
want to
quantity.
complain about something a little bit, okay? थोड़ा frustration में निकालना
हाँ
है मुझे.
पर हम लोग रूम स्टार्ट कर ले.
हाँ, रूम स्टार्ट कीजिए भाई, बट दिस इज समथिंग दैट बिफोर द रूम स्टार्ट्स मैं क्रिप करना चाहता हूँ.
ठीक है बिल्कुल.
हाँ.
करो. आयुष
I
भाई will take over after you. He is the leader.
I want to crib about the hi Ayush. I want to crib about the fact that back, a few months ago, Clubhouse was a space where when you used to talk sense and you had some rich content to share, people would actually come and listen. Okay, so whatever used to happen on Twitter, whatever drama was there, people used to come here to get information and then fight some more over party politics on Twitter. Now what has happened is that that environment has come over here. People just flex and spread their own, like, whatever they feel, and there are angry exchanges and there's no information passed or understood. And in fact, whenever useful information is passed, people like either don't show interest in it or actively express that, like, we don't want information, we just want you to take our side और his side or that side or this side. तो ये बहुत ही गंदा चीज़ हो चुका है. ठीक है, आई डोंट नो टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट विल बी एबल टू you know spread the message through replays, but still I don't want to be too pessimistic before the room starts. So yeah, that's about it.
Yes. Hey, Anand. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, Anand. And yes, I read your recent article. It was absolutely very brilliant and something which actually speaks the reality of the events in Indo-Pacific. To be very frank, I came out with this room. I had a discussion with Piyush Anand yesterday, and I thought of bringing out the basic nitty-gritties of the discussion that we must actually have when we talk about the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Now, when you look into the specific thing which is actually happening in Indo-Pacific at present, I believe that Indo-Pacific is actually deviated from its real identity. And the so-called Quad, which has been the basic pillar of United States of America engagement in Indo-Pacific, that has been deviated. And I would again go to the basis that why it has been deviated. It has been deviated because you look into what has been the real issue in Indo-Pacific after 24th of February 2022, when the Russia actually led an invasion. Now, at that time, the liberal Scott Morrison of Australia, Fumio Kishida, who wanted to actually create the so-called Japan 2.0 at present, and then you have United States of America Democratic President Joe Biden. They absolutely want that Indo-Pacific must turn out to be the global front and must turn out to be the global picture and the global representation where every discussion must actually happen, and discussion which is something which do not have any strings attached with Indo-Pacific. Now here was the Indian problems and here was the Indian dilemma, where India actually argued and said to the other members that look, at present what we want is we want that the topics of Indo-Pacific must actually be limited to Indo-Pacific. We must not talk about something which do not have anything to do or anything relatable to that of the Indo-Pacific. That is something which Indian argue particularly. But what has happened is India balance in Indo-Pacific has been certain, has not been going on the right turf, specifically after 24th of February, because India was a lone partner in Quad in terms of leading a big action that is of sanction against the Russia. And I absolutely argue the so-called argument that has been coming from the three countries like Australia, Japan, and United States of America, where they actually ask India to lead and to take side and to actually follow the United States of America move in leading a sanctions against Russia, because India actually went for the centrality principles, and that is something which India would be benefited, not with taking a sides of United States of America. So in that terms, the thing is that there has been a certain dilemma position that India has been into Indo-Pacific. Now, when I look into the development of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, everyone, I feel that this is a penultimate move by United States of America in its presence in Indo-Pacific. Because what United States of America particularly thought that the engagement of Indo-Pacific and the engagement of Quad, the engagement that they have on the other countries would actually let the other countries to take side of United States of America. But since it hasn't happened, now United States of America is again replicating what China has been doing in Indo-Pacific. It's not a new move, to be very frank, but that move is something which has been replicated by United States of America, because you need to understand one thing, that the present day geopolitics of 21st century actually revolves around a proverb, and that actual statement is that economical string after a certain time would lead into a political string, and that is something which China has been following in Indo-Pacific, and that has gave China a successful run in the South Pacific as well. I'm just mentioning the name. You look into the development of China with Solomon, you look into the development of China with Kiribati, you look into the development of China with Vanuatu, a small island which even you would find difficult to trace on the global political map, but that is something which China has been doing. And now United States of America thought particularly that why not to align the other members, and that is why they have came out with this Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, which includes a 13 country. Now why I say that it's a good idea, it's a good idea, but again it has a certain loophole as well, and the other speakers like likes of Anand Bhai and everyone out here would actually be explaining you in detail. But my personal perspective out here is that United States of America move into the region is actually unilateral, and that unilateral is to lower the dependency of China into the region, which somehow or the other is a win-win situation for India into the region. But again, the loophole actually comes in when the presence or the focus of United States of America move is heavily been relied on the ASEAN nation. Now, you need to understand one thing, that many people say that ASEAN country is something which is very much united. It is an association of 10 nations. But I believe, and I would say that I'm only the lone follower of the belief that ASEAN is absolutely divided. And when I say ASEAN is divided,
Oh, no, no,
you
no. I am with you on this. I'm sorry for interrupting. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So the thing is, you find that ASEAN is actually something which has been divided. I see a complete two ASEAN which lies. One is the North ASEAN and other is the South ASEAN. And when I say North ASEAN particularly has a certain proximity with the China. And the examples that I have is recently, Anand, you might be knowing that we had a certain discussion last time when Laos was involved in the 6.1 billion trade deal, or the deal that was been done between Laos and between China. So there has Yep. been, yeah, there has been a certain so-called economical relationship that lies with the northern part of the ASEAN with that of the China, and it would be very difficult for United States of America move to actually lower the dependency of the northern ASEAN from that of the China, because you need to understand the existence of China, the existence of ASEAN particularly, the existence of ASEAN came into because they do not wanted to come in the influence of the so-called Russians at that time.
and since they did not wanted to come into the Russians influence or the USSR influence, my apologies, it would be very difficult to let ASEAN choose a side, because ASEANs are one such country where, just I'm giving you an example of what happened in November of 2021, where ASEAN Foreign Ministry had a meet with the bureaucrats of United States of America, and you won't believe, just after 24 days, Wang Yi actually visited ASEAN, and the other leaders of ASEAN actually welcomed Wang Yi. So that is something which speaks about the flexibility of ASEAN, and looking into the potential that ASEAN had. ASEAN would never ever commit a crime or never ever commit a mistake of choosing a side, that is United States of America or that is even China. Though they would say that they are flexible in nature, but at present the ratio is 60-40, 60 towards China and 40 towards United States of America. And that was something which is a bigger problem for for ASEAN members. Now moving into the other regions of Indo-Pacific, and that regions is actually the South Pacific geopolitical event, which is a very interesting event. And I believe Anand has also wrote a literary work into this, and you can find this and you can connect with Anand in terms of getting the copy of that. But he has specifically mentioned of what's been happening on the South Pacific as well. Now the region of South Pacific is also very interesting, where the thing is, the diplomats of the other countries have argued that China have actually led a so-called economical paralysis in the South Pacific. Economical paralysis which was heavily targeted towards Australia. And that is why you see that it has actually caused the Scott Morrison unilateral approach of anti-China. Though I believe that the defeat of Scott Morrison involves a major reason, but one of the reasons is that people of Australia, some of the segments of Australia, including the people who have certain sentiments with the Labour Party, they do not want it that Australia must turn out to be the so-called hotspot of economical war, which to be very frank is also very true with the Arab world. Why you say Mohammed bin Salman and the other members of United Arab Emirates and the other Gulf countries are very less vocal towards United States of America at present? The reason behind is they do not want that their country must turn out to be the battlefield of the economical warfare, which United Arab Emirates have absolutely mentioned, where United Arab Emirates have came out and they have said that, look, we do not want to do the so-called F-35 deal with United States of America. The reason is United States of America wanted that we must choose the side of them and must lower the dependency of ours towards China. And that is something which has also been happening with Australia in that case as well. But the recent political shift which has actually happened in Australia, which involves a Labour leader, that is Anthony Albanese, coming into the power, I believe that I believe Australia would now take a decent and a diverse and a multiple approach in geopolitics. It won't be anything that goes anti-China, but rather the anti-China sentiments would actually limit, but it would continue to follow. It would continue to follow. Anthony Albanese cannot go against the civilians of Australia. This would actually, sorry, this would actually follow for a time. So that is something which has actually been happening in the regions of the Pacific or the regions of the South Pacific. The last point which I would like to focus upon is Indo-Pacific Economic Framework has a certain point, and it's a certain point which includes helping on the humanitarian terms, helping on the disaster, involving and lowering the dependency of the other countries towards China. But this would take time to yield a result. And this would actually help a countries which are small in nature, the likes of Brunei, because the countries would actually get a diversification tools in terms of engaging with China, and also via the RCEP. On the other hand, they also had a chance to engage with United States of America as well. But in the long run, you need to figure it out that how it turns up, what will the repercussions, and will India be the key partner in terms of this? That is something which is debatable, and that is something which we need to figure it out. That would be my limiting introductory points, Sanat. You can continue and you can add to certain missing points of mine as well.
Thank you so much, Ayush. Bhai. As usual, always the brightest start is necessary for such a discussion. So my introductory remarks would be limited to 1 or 2 minutes at the most, because major part has already been covered. I'll just speak about the concept of QSD, because that was originally the name. We made it Quad because it was led by 4 nations. Now, the whole aspect around Quad, which was started in 2007 by the initiatives of the Japanese Prime Minister, one of my favorite leaders at that time, Shinzo Abe, was to undermine the Chinese adventurism in and around the Indo-Pacific, especially around South China Sea or the Eastern Philippine Sea or whatever they may call it, and also to keep in touch with those nations which, quote unquote, might also have the same sentiment with regards to the Chinese ambition. Of course, there was no surprise that the Americans jumped in. They were led by, well, technically George Bush, but since he was more or less a political vegetable, Dick Cheney was controlling the office, he came in. And of course, you had the Australian Prime Minister Howard, who I believe was more forthcoming and, in fact, more smarter than the last PM who was there. And then you had Manmohan Singh, who was representing India. Now, the thing is, this is where my first criticism comes for Quad, that it is naturally quite unstable. In its instability is to the level that you cannot imagine. It started in 2007 and then less than a year it stopped. And it stops when Obama comes to power and he decides, no, I think this is not the correct way to go about it. We should probably let it be. We can more or less have a good relationship with the Chinese. And if not, it is better that we do not poke the dragon unnecessarily, right? Now, given the fact that this was the American decision, now QSD or Quad as we know it ultimately stops. Therein lies the first criticism. It does not follow a uniform progress of discussion whether Quad actually is necessary or not for the other partners. If the Americans say it is not necessary or it is a problematic thing, it stops, then the Quad will stop. So it has been managed by one particular nation, obviously the Americans, because they are stronger than the rest. And that is where the first criticism comes, that Quad has not made any significant steps with regards to letting other democracies speak for themselves. Then fast forward to 2017. Under the Trump administration, Quad is reignited again. There are negotiations in November, and they decide to come back, more such similar statements and meetings. It's slow, it's gradual, but it is done. Now, the problem here again is it's the Americans deciding it. No opinions taken from any other nation. No opinions taken from the change of leaderships as well. So that criticism continues. However, of course, given the fact that the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, CPEC through Pakistan, their support through BRICS, and many other investments both in Central Asia and Africa triggers this. And Trump ultimately realizes that Russia is not really our concerned enemy right now. It is more so with the Chinese. He's more economical, right? So he decides to start this process, and it gets stronger and stronger with continued sanctions. And of course, with the Chinese response, they term it as an Asian NATO. Now Trump loses the election. Biden comes to power. Biden is of a more protected approach when it comes to bringing Quad up in the picture. But as soon as the Chinese make it clear that, listen, we don't give a flying F whether you are here or Trump is going to come back, our damage have already been done, relationships have soured. So he decides that it is necessary, at least in theory, to just meet and have some discussions with the respective leaders. Of course, he understands the political mood. Not he, his advisors do understand the political mood in Australia, in Japan, and in India. And he feels that Quad or QSD could be necessary to keep that not only under check, but also in line with what the American policy is. Everything was going according to their plan until the Russian special operation in Ukraine. The Indians made their position clear despite renowned pressure from America. And I would have to laud the Indian foreign policy here that they made separate deals and made separate bilateral meetings with both other members of the Quad, namely Japan and Australia, that the Americans were forced to retreat and forced to admit that this is something we take with a bitter pill, that the Russian-Indian relationship, no matter how less or how increased it is, will remain at its pace, will not reduce for any new initiative, not until and unless there is a direct threat to their sovereignty. So again, the notion of Quad, which the Americans wanted to continue with, is also under threat now, that they have come to realize that we cannot unilaterally decide what other partners in the Quad would do. And they also realize the fact that the Indians are not really that dependent on Quad, rather than we are actually more dependent on the Indians when it comes to Indo-Pacific. Now, everything was fine, but why did I talk about QSD and then when this room is about IPEF? The point is, it is again another initiative by the Americans with the other member nations of Quad steering the process with other 12, 11, 10 nations, whomsoever they are. And this is a direct response, and unfortunately, a predictable response to what the Chinese have done with the Solomon Islands. They have had a good relationship. They have signed a good deal, a good, decent economic, strategic, and security deal that allows them to dock their ships, and these ships could be of varying natures near the Solomon Islands. Now, the Australians were caught napping here, which is why, another very important criticism for the former head of state goes. And I am really not concerned whether this current head of state is going to address it in a much more renowned effort, because I don't think he will. He has to monkey balance between the two. But yes, this is one thing which motivated the Americans to bring in another front in the Indo-Pacific, not just a so-called military, or I would say a military strategic security-based organization, but more so economic, and more, of course, walking on the lines of having economic deals and climate change. And as if you look at the basic fundamentals and the joint statement of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, they want to do more projects on over hydrocarbons, then climate change, then there are free trade agreements also being discussed, and so on and so forth. So my limited criticism again is that it is spearheaded by one nation, followed with partial or complete support or objective by the others. And to this date, it remains an unstable organizational framework, but there are hopeful and positive signs that it can actually come up and counter the Chinese juggernaut which is there, which has also shown decline, by the way. But it is very much there, and that is why this response has occurred. It is a predictable response because they did not think about this before the Solomon Islands announced their security deal. They didn't even think about this when Fiji had announced their relationship with the Chinese going ahead. And this was way back in 2016, 2017, right? And in fact, even then, the Indians had tried to make their presence, and they have tried. Let's not be very negative about the PUSD. They have tried to make their presence known with Fiji. But at the end of the day, as IR is unpredictable, my last point would be that it is far to be seen whether this would be another failed experiment, or will it be halted if there's a change of power in America, or whether Americans believe now, which is of course I doubt, that it is important to also listen to what other regional players have to say. Because let's not forget, after 2007, when Quad was sidelined, it is very much possible this particular organizational framework can also get sidelined with just mere economic deals coming up to the foray. And if the Chinese use a tactic of wait and watch, then you see the other nations over here in both IPEF and also in Quad go and have much more better ties with the Chinese. And the Chinese are holding no stones unturned. They're also trying to attract India while making statements protecting the reason why they're not exporting wheat. So all of this is hand in glove. So it is very important to realize that if you are starting an organization, it has to be started with a serious effort and not with some underlying objective of trying to convince other nations to not follow their national interest. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, Anand. Good points. And Gamraj, do you have certain points?
Yeah, I've written down a lot of things, but if you want to go ahead, sir, like you can speak as well, and then I'll come in.
No, let Gamrat Bhaiya speak.
Okay, just I want to extend one point of view, Sanat, where you mentioned the so-called political shift in Australia, and you need to understand that what, to be very frank, Australia get from Indo-Pacific, because you look into Scott Morrison has been a very vocal player against China, and along with that, along with a certain displacement of China and Australia relationship, there has been a certain proximity of Australia presence into the regions of Indo-Pacific and particularly towards India. And I do not believe that. I believe that it got started when Scott Morrison actually clicked selfie with Prime Minister Modi, right? So that is
Oh,
something.
yes.
Yeah, right. So that is somehow the other tells you the so-called proximity between the two nations. But I feel that Australia is actually in the losing track as of now. And that is something which, to be very frank, Anthony Albanese need to work upon. Because when I look into what Quad has done to Australia, Quad has done, Quad has actually brought
China much more closer to Australia now. And in that, COVID-19 has absolutely helped China into his ambition, into their ambition. The thing was, first back in the month of 2020, it was the Chinese who accessed the regions of the Kiribati. Now, China came out and they said that, look, Kiribati, we would be offering you the humanitarian disasters. And along with that, there has been a certain relationship which has been untold to the media, but there has been a certain thing which has been signed into that as well. Now, the dilemma for the poor nation has always been that every poor nation want to develop. You look into Bangladesh. Bangladesh has set up their economical, target to turn from underdeveloped to developed by almost 2040 to 2050, and that is something where you see certain initiatives of China into the matter, and that is why that is also very true for the nations, small nations like Kiribati, Vanuatu. Now, China accessed the regions of Kiribati, and soon after that, China led an economical paralysis towards Australia by not actually importing the top variety of coal, that is the anthracite of coal. And Australia actually has the 60 to 70% of the high abundance of the anthracite coal, which is a high amount of the carbon compared to the Indian coal that is bituminous in nature and that is lignite in nature. So economical paralysis which has started, which again led Australia to do what is called AUKUS. Now AUKUS, what it has done AUKUS is that it has also created a displacement between Jacinda Ardern relationship and also with that of the Australia. Because the critics of Jacinda Ardern always says that Jacinda Ardern is one such player who is very liberal. I consider her as the female version of Mr. Trudeau of Canada, and she is one who have ultimately been very vocal towards China as well. Now, after the AUKUS that was being done, Jacinda Ardern government came out with one ultimatum and one notice where they do not allow the so-called marine submarines of Australia to enter into the UNCLOS controlled water bodies of New Zealand. So China has also been able to displace a relationship with between New Zealand and between Australia. Why I mention New Zealand? Because New Zealand is a force to reckon with in the Australian continent, particularly because you have very less countries into that. And along with that, the development of AUKUS have made Australia very much tilted towards United States of America, which have allowed the permanent visibility of China into the matter and into the regions. So that is something which may be troublesome situation. That is why you see the challenge for Albanese is more than it seems. That are my points. Yeah, Gamraj, you can continue, sir.
Yes. Yes. Wait just a second. Yeah. I have a few points here. First of all, thank you for that analysis, Ayush. And you were quite spot on the divide on ASEAN. I did express my agreement with you there as well. And I want to point out towards one particular country in quote unquote northern ASEAN, um, uh, upon which we had recently held a room also. I think another was there for the first part. I don't know. The second part, I held it for Myanmar basically. Um it is true that the northern ASEAN countries are sort of under the influence of the Chinese directly because of the economic partnership and frankly dependency as well. I mean, Laos. I mean, it cannot survive, without that close partnership with the closest, big power to it. Part of its, a small part of its borders also uh, are, in continuation with the Chinese border as well. And I think with the Yunnan province, I think so. I'm not exactly sure right now, but that actually is a very interesting area to look at. And Myanmar, for instance, I mean, people have this perception that northeast of India is disturbed and this and that. And I mean, in the recent years, things have been improved greatly. But Myanmar has been disturbed forever. And especially like, the problems that are there on our, I mean, on the borders where like, our border sort of meets with the Burmese border, that part of the world is actually, I mean, there is a lot of ethnic strife throughout the country, and the Chinese actually have had an active role in sort of stoking, sort of a what do you call, a sort of an imbalance in that area. And even though the recent coup that came along seems to be a little shocking to Beijing, because they had other plans, but uh, the point is that it is a system uh, which is in Myanmar that the Chinese understand and even the Pakistanis understand. So Burma could be a potentially like a great country, another front, if things would stabilize in Burma. And so from that point of view, uh, the Chinese sort of want another market there. But I mean, things are so complex over there. Ultimately, what happens is that because the country is unstable, they rely on trade with China to whatever extent possible, despite of the disturbances. On one hand, the Chinese keep the country disturbed, and on the other hand, they want things to calm down as well. That is something that would only happen if there's a domestic push for that, and that seems to be lacking in Myanmar for now. So whatever works for them, that is fine. So my point is that with the example of Burma, I was trying to demonstrate that how both the things are done by the Chinese in northern ASEAN, especially like in the developing countries. I mean, Thailand is relatively immune to this, and Laos, like you brought up, like is not because of its past as well. Cambodia is also now under influence, but although it doesn't have an exact proximity, but which other big power is influential in Cambodia than the Chinese? I mean, we are certainly not there, despite of our old cultural connections. There is a population that is in Southeast Asia. There is a population that is native to Southeast Asia, but is also of Chinese heritage. So that's like a huge connection with China on that front as well. Um, and then you have Vietnam, which is like now on the rise. This is a fundamental problem with the northern ASEAN and South ASEAN. Kind of like there is a difference over there. So that's a very very interesting point, and I agree with you that in order to make headways into these countries, we have to show them, we have to demonstrate them, and by us I mean in this context, like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or India itself, that we are a viable alternative. And I'll get to that point as well, that how that can happen. But the point is that right now there is nothing there. We don't even study Southeast Asia properly in India. So that's a huge gap there. Okay, now another point that I want to bring up is you have to understand why Mr. Trump like pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in the first place. What were the concerns? Now, what happened though? Like when Mr. Trump pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it benefited both the Chinese as well as the US, but in two different ways. With the Chinese, what happened was that there was no competition for it, for its own, regional comprehensive economic program, the RCEP, right? There was no competition for it at the time, and the TPP was the only thing that was, the only viable challenge against it, and that was, for all practical intents and purposes, gone. So there was a vacuum there, and this is a vacuum that the Americans have been trying to fill for a long time. It may very well be that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework may be a part of that same continuation. To what extent that may succeed or not is a big problem. And the point I'm trying to make here is that why did he pull out in the first place? Well, um, I mean, a free trade sort of a situation, or relatively like controlled tariffs with the developing countries as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership would do one thing for America. It would certainly reduce the number of jobs there in the US. As it is, the manufacturing sector has shifted mostly to Asia, if not only into China, then other parts of Southeast Asia as well. And this would mean that it further incentivizes other businesses to to jump ship and like move to Asia in terms of manufacturing, other parts of international trade, and that would mean reduced jobs in the US. And his platform at that time was America first, and his point was that we have to decouple from quote unquote Asia, of course China, and then Asia as a whole, so that we are able to sort of better the domestic situation in our country. That's not going to happen given the current situation, because the wealth has completely shifted to China, and that is going to disturb the American market. So, it's a country on decline, and they will try to find solutions for it. But any kind of a, my point is here is that any kind of a relatively free trade environment with Asia, including the countries that are part of the TPP, then and now, IPF, this would, reduce number of jobs, and the domestic situation can get more dire in the US as a result of this, as it is the country is politically polarized right now. So this is actually a fear that the conservatives in the US have, right? Both the parties, in fact. And because of this, there is a domestic instability in the US, which is why you see a polarization and whatnot. Uh, will this new arrangement of the Indo-Pacific framework, economic framework, will it inherit the problems of TPP? That is a big question. I think that it will, right? So unless and until I don't see anything concrete or believable, I am going to be deeply suspicious of it. Yes, it incentivizes the Americans more, and it prioritizes them. Why? Frankly, because they're trying to replace the TPP. It is about their interests. It is not about your or my interests. And herein lies another problem, that the Americans cannot restore their past glory of trade domination. The 90s are gone. The subprime crisis changed everything, right? So the thing here is that if you are going to sort of find a situation where you can assert your supremacy in the old way, it won't work. I mean, functionally it is not possible. I'm not saying that the Americans should not revive their past glory and make America great again, whatnot. It's just not possible the way things are. You have to work in a more plurilateral, if not multilateral environment. Okay, even if you want to decouple from the Chinese. And look, it is an administrative framework. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, as it stands, it's an administrative framework. It's an arrangement for now, in the sense that it is an intent to better, trade and economic activities amongst member countries. So we also know right now that the Trans-Pacific Partnership 11, which is a sequel to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is also on. So you have TPP 11 working in the background. Then you have the IPEF launched. The reason why we are talking about it is because India is involved. But the Americans have other plans as well, right? So there is a great deal of unsurety on this. And as I was saying earlier, many members, most members, I think, who are part of the RCEP are also part of the IPEF. So why would smaller countries with lesser of issues of strategic and military nature with the Chinese lean towards a more unstable partnership than something that has been proposed by the Chinese, which is the RCEP, and because they do it more resolutely, whatever they do, because they can, that's the system, right? They can be sure of whatever they do. And to be honest, they have their, all their cards are in their favor right now. All the cards are in their favor. So that is actually a concern. The next point I would like to make, and it's a small point, is that Europeans are also interested, by the way, in the Indo-Pacific. And particularly Germany and France in the European Union are, they did hold a high-profile sort of meeting in, I think, Paris. And this was, I think, in March, I think so. I'm not too sure right now. But let me just give me a second. Yes, so I'll just read a little bit here, not too much, I promise. It's see the it says here that the EU's first ever ministerial forum, for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, hosted in Paris by the French presidency of the Council at the end of the February, has gone largely unnoticed due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And the release of EU's long-awaited Indo-Pacific strategy in September 2021 was overshadowed by the announcement of AUKUS security partnership. This is another thing going on, another thing with AUKUS, right? Between Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States. So the US has like their hands in everything right now. They're not sure what they're doing, and this reflects the mindset of the leadership in the US right now. And this is the final point I'm trying to make, right? Strategy is not delinked from economic paradigms today, right? And you have to look at what is happening in domestic politics in each of the Quad countries to understand this. The ALP has recently come into power, right, with the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and it's the ALP. I mean, it's the same party that had Kevin Rudd. Okay, so do not expect much from the ALP. Okay, they'll talk a big talk because they have to do this monkey balancing business. But I don't know to what extent they'll be like, proactive in terms of going, in terms of challenging the Chinese, especially when they're also members of the RCEP, right? So it's not just the political elements that are there in power in the in Australia, but also the economic variables are also there. Like there are enterprises that are involved that finance the political class. So this then makes you wonder, that to what extent the ALP will be able to achieve some headway in terms of IPEF, right, for Australia. Even when the Conservatives are in power in Australian Parliament, there is a very small margin of their maneuverability. Why? Because the Australians have come to depend on the Chinese a great deal economically, and not just that, even their political underpinnings in their country have been for a very long time quite compromised. They have been. Reason being that they were testing grounds for interfering into Western societies, right? And so I have my doubts about how proactive under this government, under Prime Minister Albanese, the Australians are going to be. Like I always say, Japan has had a major earthquake right now. It is recovering from that, and all their supply chains are in China as the way things stand right now. Most of it anyway, right? So I don't know to what extent the Japanese will be willing and able to challenge the Chinese. When it comes to India, obviously, Indians will not be led by Americans because Indians are not led by anybody, right? And on top of that, if you add an unsure Washington, DC, right? And a sort of a mindset which doesn't know itself what they're doing, right? And we also know that the president himself and his family members are compromised owing to previous relationships with the Chinese. You wonder, like, to what extent, like, I mean, President Biden is saying a lot of things, but when will thought turn into action, especially when they're doing 3 or 4 things in the same region at the same time? The TPP has failed, so now there's TPP 11, there is AUKUS, then there is this going on now. So make up your mind on that, right? And Indians will not be, in my humble opinion, not be led by the Americans, certainly not an undecided and untrustworthy leadership that is currently in DC, right? So I'm sorry for, like, being so blunt about it, but in my most humble opinion, this economic intent of partnership has every signal, the way things are standing right now, for it to, I'm sorry, for it to fail. And we must find separate solutions. Either the Europeans get more interested in India, and we have to move in that direction where we make business more easy. If we have to make new special economic zones for that can be one solution. I'm just providing an idea. And if the Americans intend to do anything about Indo-Pacific, they have to first decide on whether they are willing and able to shift more jobs to the developing countries. That is how it is going to happen. There is no way out of this. Automation and everything is fine, but if you want things to be done right now, that becomes a problem. And automation will even negatively affect the jobs in the US as well. So those are some of my points that I wanted to share with you. I hope like I've been able to bring some uh, newer facets into this conversation.
No, indeed, you have, and these are certain things which we were discussing about it. Just a second, yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah.
अब आवाज आ रही है तेरे को?
Yes, yes.
हाँ. No, these are really important points you have mentioned, because it is very important to understand that it's not just the Americans who care about this region. Europeans themselves are very much interested. And I had mentioned in my article AUKUS. So AUKUS is exactly why the Europeans are and were actually very miffed with the Americans and the Brits and with half of Europe before the Russians thought it's the right time to start their special operation. It was the Russian operation that got them on the same table. Otherwise, they were having a very nice differences wala situation between them. And secondly, yes, the whole notion of how half of ASEAN, which was mentioned by Ayush as 60% in favor of the Chinese and the rest in favor of the US. I would rather say they are not even in favor of the US. Other than Singapore and thoda bahut of Vietnam, I don't see any other nation actually being in favor of the Americans outright. They are mostly neutral, or at the most, just trying to play their cards well. Only the Singaporeans and the Vietnamese are like outright anti-China. Even the Vietnamese are not pro-US in its whole approach. So those regions in ASEAN which share a boundary with the Chinese are susceptible to have this relationship, because they have them at their boundaries. Whereas other nations which may be a bit distant, they may or may not have that much of a problem, but because of supply chain issues and also because of COVID, with the Chinese taking a step ahead and trying to establish certain trade links, you might see them also bending towards the Chinese. Hence, you see, this is a predictable response by the Americans. Now, everybody was jumping up and down and hoo ha, oh, look, the Americans are coming, the Quad is re established. They don't research, number one. And this is exactly what Gamraj pointed out, that you see, we don't research the South Asian, East Asian region properly. We only look at short term goals, and that too goals of ego, not even understanding that international relations do not work over clubhouse based inner political fights. They are more complicated and more complex in nature. And our misgivings, which is why you mentioned, Gamraj, that the Indians will not be dictated by America anymore, was pretty much visible recently when on three specific occasions our external affairs minister made it very clear that we are not going to bend towards your line of thought. He may be answering questions to the journalists, but it was a clear message to America, which is why the Americans, when Jake Sullivan was asked, he had to soften his stance with India. This is why they are now signing a $4 billion deal. I think it's a trade deal. No, sorry, it's a security deal. They're trying to shift the dependence, which is almost 60 to 65% that we have over Russians over military tech. They're trying to get it towards them. In fact, recently, Sukhoi, I'm not sure which version of Sukhoi it was cancelled by the Indians, and there were people saying that it is because of their performance in the Ukrainian war. But at the same time, the Indians also cancelled a batch of American tech because that was used by the Ukrainians and it did not work very well. So this is what we are trying to do. Anyway, Ayush bhai.
Yeah, can I just
Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
mean just a little, yeah. So I mean it became clear to me from the statement that I saw by President Biden. He began a conversation raising hopes of everybody that this forum is about democracies versus autocracies. Then he goes on to talk about Russia in a Quad forum. He talks about Russia. Uh, it's not like he shouldn't talk about it. Obviously, like there's a war on. First of all, it's not his war or the Americans' war, but we know what drama is ongoing on that front, so they're going to talk about it. but really opening your address with Russia and then not taking the same kind of stance on China, right? So that is quite telling on how decisive the people in DC are over this. That how proactive they. Of course, they are going to blame you at the end of the day for their failures because that's what the establishment
They
in DC
always
does.
do. They
Yeah,
always do.
उनका गलती था उसको देखो. They made
यहाँ पे भी
mistakes. We
यहाँ
didn't
पे
do
भी
jack
पता
shit.
है, sorry
Yeah.
that I'm interrupting you, just 5 seconds. यहाँ पे भी
Yeah.
they are blaming the Aussies for not paying attention at the Solomon Islands. अबे भाई.
Yeah. I mean, the best part is that, I mean, I see like the diaspora getting, I mean, influenced by this trap also, especially those in the US. Okay. Every time they strategically blame not just India, but any other part of the world, okay, for things to not go their way. People just like, happily believe that, whatever the Americans are saying is right. It's not, right? So it's a bit crazy out there. And you first get a decision maker in DC, bhaiya. Then we'll think about stuff, okay? Don't just talk, okay? Do things, don't talk. That's the main issue here. Yes, Ayush, please go ahead.
No, you guys have absolutely brought in some very interesting points. And while Anand was speaking, while Gamraj bhai you were speaking, I was actually making the analysis. And Anand and Gamraj, you mentioned the point of European Union. What United States of America has done, and this may be wrong, but again, that is how I analyze. United States of America has actually created the so-called political void in the whole turf of European Union at present. That means inside European Union, inside Europe continent, it is because of United States of America there has been a certain differences. I will tell you how. And one of the thing is that now changing, there is this change in time. Earlier people used to say that because of the prior to the 1991, any changes in USSR would impact the other part of the world. After that, people used to say any changes in United States of America would impact the other part of the world. Now I say, or now I feel that any changes in Indo-Pacific would actually impact the other part of the world. Let me give you an example. It was 24th of February 2022 incident, they actually came on the uniform page. And I wonder, what if the so-called 24th of February invasion didn't happen? I believe that there must be this embassy shutdown of London, embassy shutdown of UK in Paris. That was actually the worst case scenario that could have happened because of the political divide that is there between France and Britain. And when I look the incident that is happening in the Indo-Pacific, which involves the involvement of AUKUS, which Australia, to be very frank, first went with French, but then after Australia went with United States of America, then Australia went with the partners of United Kingdom. It has actually rifted a relationship between France, relationship between United Kingdom, and the relationship between France and United States of America. But again, it won't matter. The reason behind United States of America would sort it out because France and United States of America are the common partners in terms of the UNSC, in terms of the G7 and the other things, even in terms of the NATO. But there has been a problem between UK and France relationship because these two countries actually shares a boundary, right? They belong to the very same territory. So you look into what I mean to say is how United States of America engagement always lead to what is called one supremacy, and that supremacy is United States of America, that is United States of America alone. So people all around the world have this mentality that United States of America may lead to certain hegemony in Indo-Pacific. Let me tell you, United States of America have already led a hegemony in the Europe continent by actually dividing its own country. The situation of Europe at present is such where Europe, to be very frank, is running without a proper vehicle, running without a proper driver, running without a proper leaders. Means who is a prominent leader at present in Europe? It is just, and specifically in European Union, it is just Emmanuel Macron at present. I do not consider Olaf Scholz because Olaf Scholz is one such guy. Imagine me as a Biden, and when I say Olaf Scholz, that Olaf Scholz, you must actually again, you must actually carry out the Nord Stream pipeline with Russia from tomorrow. You must start that. Olaf Scholz is one such guy who will do it tomorrow. So I do not want that leader to be the leader of European Union at present, right? But United States of America have actually created this divide. Now United States of America also wanted this on Indo-Pacific as well. What I believe what Quad has specifically done for India is Quad
actually helped India to do what is called geo-economics more rather than geopolitics. And I believe that has been a certain ambition of the Indian government as well. Because many people say that no, Quad is something which is more a geopolitical in nature. I believe we can say it once Quad turned into a military deal or military association, but because of the so-called veto by India, as I say, because of the so-called reject by India, Quad has never turned into a military alliance. And I'm pretty much sure the present government that we have, who actually thinks with all his senses, who actually believes in pragmatism, who actually believes and respect the flexibility of the geopolitics, they would never ever take the extreme hard form of signing and making Quad into a strategic deal. India is more than happy to with the non-strategical deal of Indo-Pacific, non-strategical deal of Quad, because India's intentions for this time in Quad has been the geoeconomics. The reason is Quad actually provides India a platform to engage with the other countries, and Australia is a great example. You look into how times have changed and how swiftly times have changed between India and Australia because again of the rejuvenation of the Quad, and actually the so-called CPEC, the so-called economical deal recently which has been signed between India and Australia is somehow the other speaks volume to the fact with 95% free trade agreement that has been signed. Now, when I look into the positivity of the Indian Indo-Pacific economic framework, the positivity would be that India over the period of time has actually struggled to make its relationship with the ASEAN. The reason behind is ASEAN believes in its own neutrality, and some of the ASEAN members are central towards China. So it has not given India a proper time to engage with the other members of the ASEAN. But since some of the members of the ASEAN are actually part of the Indo-Pacific economic framework, what India need to do is India need to wait for its right time, and then with the further pan engagement, that is the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, India must actually penetrate the bilateral to bilateral relationship, that is the economical relationship with the ASEAN country member who are the member of Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Because at present, how India can be benefited, I believe from Indo-Pacific, geoeconomics is more to offer for India in terms of Indo-Pacific at present. And we must not fully go with United States of America. Look, United States of America, you all might be knowing, United States of America engagement in any other part of the world brings lot many promises, right? And lot many pseudo promises as well. They believe in the principles of democracy, they believe in the principles of that, but to be very frank, United States of America is the most hollow democratic nation in the world. That is why you say that you hardly see the presence of United States of America into the region of Africa, into the strategic location of Horn of Africa nation, into the strategical location of Sub-Sahel region, into the strategical regions of even the grasslands regions of Africa, which is central part of Africa. The reason behind United States of America invitation comes with the democratical code of conduct. And to be very frank, for a country who are struggling in poverty, who are struggling in starvation, who is struggling because of so-called successive cascade coups, they won't be thinking of what is called democracy. Rather, they would be thinking of what is called economics to sustain. And that is why you say United States of America is very limiting in its Africa approach. So that is what India need to do. Though India need to utilize United States of America when it comes to our inner interest or our own interest, but we must not go with the flow of United States of America, because the flow of United States of America come with a certain cost where you need to choose sides and you need to become extreme. You need to actually again come into an enemy of nation who are actually the real enemy of United States of America. And along with that, when you come under United States of America, you would only be the second power, not the first power. That is what Russia have realized with China. So Russia and China relationship is something which we must do with United States of America and India relationship. Means we must not invite United States of America to our neighbors, the very same how Russia do not invite China into the Central Asia. Reason behind, Central Asia is a turf of Russia, and India's South Asian regions is a turf of Indian subcontinent, or to be very frank, the greater Bharat land. So in that terms, we need to maintain, and the pragmatical relationship is something which we need to further understand. That is what my point is. Anything to add, Anand?
नहीं आयुष आयुष ये तुमने क्या कर दिया 70% ऑफ इंडियन अमेरिकन क्राउड ऑन क्लब हाउस जो कि सारे के सारे प्रकांड पंडित हैं इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस पे वो तुम पे भड़क जाएंगे
हाँ, बिल्कुल
कल
सही
इस पे
बात,
कॉल आउट रूम लगेगा
बिल्कुल सही बात, वो करना जरूरी है, बहुत जरूरी है।
मतलब
I'm
एक
sorry.
महान आदमी ने मुझे एक बात कही थी आयुष बहुत पहले, इतना सच मत बोला कर यार।
nahi, but thank you for saying.
कठोर वचन.
No, but this is important to understand. जो आयुष ने बोला है और what Ayush has just mentioned is absolutely necessary. And see, this is why I asked him separately to do this room, because in yesterday's room he had asked me to come. I said, "यार देखो मैं उधर नहीं आने वाला हूँ." Not because it was run in unapologetic Indian, but because I knew the context or the conversation there, and it would have been a very big retardation in my opinion. So I asked and I requested him, please alag se hum apna karte hain and we'll freely discuss there without any notion of constant interruptions and may I come in and give some points by a deep dark voice. So I didn't want that at all. You get my drift. So the point is, he has absolutely nailed it. Okay, he has nailed it with the
Yep.
American problem, especially with the European bit, and I absolutely agree with him over his analogy with the division, because not just the Americans, even the Russians wanted the European Union to be divided. Right now, it's not divided because the Americans are using it nicely, but NATO again has taken the lead, which irks the Europeans a lot. Which is why when the Chinese call this a nation NATO, I laugh, okay? Because QSD is nowhere that influential. Number one. Number two, one interesting thing which Ayush did mention was wherein lies the idea that the Indians, so on and so forth, do not express to go away from their rigid position, and I don't think they should. And yes, they have absolutely benefited a lot from Quad, which is why I don't know if you guys noticed in my article, I said it very clearly that the Indians don't get to lose anything if they leave Quad. And it is absolutely true. They have actually learned a lot from Quad and they know how to implement it.
Anand,
With the, हाँ भाई मैं
could
बोलो
you
बोलो
put up your link over here? So,
मैं करता हूँ अभी थोड़ी
ठीक है,
देर में.
ठीक है.
एंड ऐसा है कि वाई बिकॉज सी स्मॉल एग्जाम्पल दिस रीसेंट एग्जाम्पल विच the problem in the American way is कि we are democratic, but we'll also make sure that that democracy makes you dance on our democratic tune, right? And they tried doing it when it came to the Russian special operation, but it didn't work with India. And both the Japanese and the Australians, they were like, "Yeah, हमने एक बार we have said it to the Indians that please go and condemn Russia. They have condemned it. They will not sanction them. They'll buy oil, and it doesn't matter. We should focus on Indo-Pacific." And that is exactly when they backed off. So this is absolutely true that they have learned a lot of geopolitics from this organization. Not only have they learned, they have also used it, like Ayush mentioned, to exert some influence on other partners and possibly other nations. So here is my first support for both QSD and IPEF for the Indian side, because I don't give anything for the Japanese or the Australians, right? I'm an Indian. First of all, it helps us to grow and it helps us to influence and have good bilateral relations. Now, understand what I meant when I say bilateral relations. Not between QSD or IPEF and the nations, but between India and the respective nations. We use this forum, we have good relations, we make sure that even if there are certain partners who object to our national interest, the others will not toe that line, right? And thank you so much, Ayush bhai. And secondly, we will also make sure that while we are doing this, we also try to reduce the Chinese influence. Now we'll come to the second part of this discussion, which is absolutely necessary. Is this a path of pragmatism? And the pragmatism path is, of course, curtailing the Chinese influence, now backed by Russia also. So let's not forget, when these four leaders were doing this particular wave, Chinese and Russian jets were actually very close to the Japanese islands. Okay, so the point here is it was all optical. All of this is called gunboat diplomacy. ठीक है, ये कल के रूम में बात नहीं किया होगा कोई. So this was all optical, and optical basis में they are expressing their displeasure, or not even displeasure, they are expressing their warning that look, you can do whatever the hell you want, we are keeping an eye on you. And the Russians are very well on board with this. They have good relations with India, hence our bilateral push but they are warning the other three nations. They don't have a good relation with the Australians. Like I mentioned, the Japanese and the Russians have a dispute over 6-7 islands which connect both land masses, unfortunately. And with the Americans, you know what it is. So herein lies the good benefit of being part of such organizations, that it gets these nations towards us, although they come here thinking that they'll benefit from America, and maybe they might, but we make it a point that we use it for our benefit. And that is where the first positive point comes, and there is hope with this organization. Number two, the antagonistic part. It is not rocket science that whether it is economic or military, the antagonist will be the Chinese, and they are already very antagonistic about it. Day before yesterday, Biden said that we will use military force to safeguard the Taiwanese border. Right, a few hours later, the White House removed that statement,
Yeah.
and that was the brilliant and the most interesting and the instability of the Quad. This is exactly my point. So you see, this is where it leads to. So the antagonism is bound to happen, whether regardless of what we say or we have good deals over climate change, because even the Chinese are interested in climate change suddenly. They're not dismissing global warming. In fact, they are actually targeting the West by saying that you are targeting us, the Chinese, the Indians, and certain other nations for the whole nonsense around global warming, while you're the ones who are leading it. So the point is, whether we go it economically or militarily, the antagonism will always be there, because China as a nation, whether we like it or not, is secure when it comes to trying to do its follow its foreign policy in some specific areas, but very insecure if they see another power poking over there. Doesn't matter whether it is a small power like the Vietnamese, or a middle or a certain transitional power from a middle power to a superpower like India, or a superpower. I would like to say this just for the sake of our NRIs over there who might get offended, the Americans. So the point is, they will always be antagonized, whether Quad progresses from here or whether they don't progress as Quad, but they progress as IPEF. So for that, it is a given, and for the Indians is actually beneficial, even if they are antagonized. It distracts them and it helps us deal with them on our boundary issues. And of course, it helps us gain allies, which we are regularly gaining, by the way, to tackle them on international forums and organizations. There is a let off there, by the way. You cannot do that with ASEAN, because Gamaraj mentioned why you can't do that with ASEAN. But with other nations in the oceanic region, once they realize the debt or the difficulties with the Chinese relationship, they might actually view India as an alternative. And India wants to do that. But herein lies my first question, which I believe most of you guys can answer if you want to, if you wish to. Do other member states want this as an objective, that the Indians should be the alternative to Chinese when it comes to an extravagant push of relations, and it comes to extravagant push of trade deals and security deals with such nations? Because let's not forget, the other members of the Quad will also feel insecure. We can say how close Abe and Modi were, but at the end of the day, both Japan and India are naturally competitors. And it's the same with the Australians. Now they also realize that yes, in a way, the Indians have more sway when it comes to Nordic nations, when it also comes to South Asia, parts of East Asia, and if they try to enter Oceania, which they have entered through Fiji and other places, they might also curtail their ambitions, right? So, do the Quad members support the Indian push of being an alternative to China? Number one, that's my first question. Number two, are the Americans actually interested? Look, all of this is great. This Quad is great. This IPEF is great. Somebody, a very certain person from the American state, who's an Indian from Jammu, had written, look, the whole world is now invested in trying to protect the Indo-Pacific. उनको कोई ये बता दो कि चाइना का सबसे बड़ा ट्रेड पार्टनर ही अमेरिका है. तो भैया, अगर जब तक ये चीज रहेगी, the Americans are not taking your discomfort with regard to trade issues that the Chinese hold in terms of influence seriously, because their hands are also in the Chinese pie. And as long as that remains, you can bring in 15,000 organizations of the similar nature in parts and bits of the world like little pores or pimples, but they don't work, and ultimately the cream is applied and they all subside. So Are the Americans serious? That is which I would really ask the room to also address, because certainly you guys may be able to understand the within lack of American push. This is nothing but a textbook predictable response after they realized and they actually went and saw the situation in the Solomon Islands. Let's not forget that there are a certain section in the Solomon Islands which actually did not like this relationship with the Chinese. Nothing matters there. The government said hum karenge to karenge, we don't give a flying f about what you think. So these are my two questions. Please, anybody who wishes to answer.
Can I address the second question, if you may allow me? Um, um, I think that it doesn't matter whether they're interested or not. I think other members of the Quad Alliance are themselves quite confused over what exactly do they want. The global power as well as economic paradigms, if not they're if I mean if they're not shifting right now, then at least things are moving in certain directions right now. So everybody's unsure. It doesn't matter what uh, it doesn't matter if they want us to uh, sort of be an alternative to China. My own view on this is that we must be, for our own sake, right? Not through IPF, but for our sake. We have to offer that alternative, not because we have something against China, but now that people are sort of a bit weirded out by the Chinese, they want to go somewhere, and we are the cheapest option available with such a huge human capital, at least on paper. It is a matter of policy decisions to at least, you know, at least get some of the manufacturing sector here. I keep saying that again and again. It is so important, right? Um, the economies of most developed countries are now saturated, and there are very few things that are now um, in their favor in terms of, you know, a great economic growth. For instance, people will want to continue their business, things will have to be manufactured anyway. So India is the only logical option here, at least in, if not now, then in the next 10 years there'll be no other option other than India. It's just a matter of fact. I'm not being nationalistic here. And therefore, I feel that it doesn't matter whether others think what we can do or not. And Americans will continue to have their, concerns about job losses and offshoring, and even automation for that matter. The Japanese are going to continue to have their problems with their aging population and aging human capital, even for that matter, and them sort of shifting their entire supply chain in China. But then again, they are some of the most proactive countries in the world who have like managed to at least incentivize moving out of China. But they're going into Southeast Asia right now. There's nothing stopping the Japanese because to come in for them to come in India in a big way. They have got a long-standing relationship with us, even during the Congress government, and I mean it is a matter of policy with them, because see, they have accepted that there is no further growth than what we've already been able to achieve. This is kind of true with the Europeans also, right? Yes, the European Union is a bit weak right now, but individually, economic realities have dawned upon most of the European nations. So they still have to go on. And in this regard, a partnership with India is something that is the future. The Americans have not woken up to the fact, because they're still America number one and we're the best, and USA, that kind of thing. It's part of the American nationalism kind of a thing that we're the best. I mean, I'm not trying to be hateful or anything. It's just not the best anymore. Yes, it's a nice country to live in. It's convenient, and there are good things there, and it is a former superpower, so to say, and that will come with a lot of perks, indeed, especially for somebody, an individual who goes from here to elsewhere, especially in the US. But on the whole, America is going through an era of decline, and I don't see anything that could work in their favor other than some technological augmentations. But they also have their limitations when, simply speaking, the economy doesn't have that much of gumption to begin with. uh, this is what my perception of this is, that whether or not others are sure or unsure about whatever you know they want to do with their respective economies, we have to show that we are able to absorb some of the manufacturing sector. Now is the golden opportunity. Now is the time for us to demonstrate. If we are able to shift, let's say, even 5 to 7% of the manufacturing sector from China, then we have something to work with. We can demonstrate further that what all can we do, and it will definitely not be as easy to do business in India as with China, because we're an accountable nation. We will ask questions. We're a democracy. We're not even a Vietnam. See, that's what is happening. People are moving from China into other authoritarian countries. How long are you going to do this? How long are you going to play this game? Smaller countries are going to saturate. I mean, Vietnam is already like, I mean, right now it's growing, but it has a very small window. So you have to come here. Might as well have some vision on it and get out of these bad habits, so to say. I know I'm making a very big statement here, but get out of these bad habits of, that you can arm twist your way into running an enterprise, and, having things selling for the cheapest rate possible because things have been made administratively and as a matter of policy by the Chinese, right? That is over now. That story is on its way out, right? You're gonna go somewhere. The only country that is left is India, and there is accountability in this country. You will have to deal with, if not all of the red tapeism, then some of it you'll have to deal with it. It's just how it is. So
Case
that's
in
my view on
point,
that.
the recent example with Elon Musk.
Yes, yes. But that has also got to do with the fact that he was actively
Huh.
kicked out also. So,
He was importing from China, so they said no,
yeah,
you can't do
yeah.
that. But that is more or less the answer to the second question. The first, with regards to Australia and Japan, I don't think they are in favor. In fact, not even ASEAN. This is something I raised in front of the ambassadors of Vietnam and Thailand. There was a session in Indian Habitat Center, I remember, in 2018, and my department was invited for it. And there were three parts of the conference, and the third part was about business. And I asked them that, is ASEAN in favor or is it fine with not only sharing the burden of the manufacturing hub with India from China? And their response was very neutral, and it was very clear that they are not fine with it. So I don't see even the IPEF in general making strides towards that. At the most, like you mentioned, it will be another form of the TTP, and that is something which has to be avoided, because we we were not really part of TTP. Here we are part of the IPEF, and while that is an added bonus for us to interact with other nations, mere interactions don't help if there are no results, right? So, which is why I am very hawkish with regards to how exceedingly successful these two enterprises are going to be. And you mentioned that America is a very nice place to live in. I mean, Naril
Well,
here had a very nice fact about it. Naril, how many guns did the Americans bought this year?
By the amount of guns they have bought is much more than the combined US and Indian armies put together, man. Can you
Yeah,
imagine?
these are the guns being bought by the citizens. So expect a
सब्जी
civil war there.
सब्जी की तरह खरीदते हैं
Dude, dude,
बंदूक।
dude,
भाई साहब
the
दो
way,
दो
the
दो
way,
दो असॉल्ट राइफल देना, दो असॉल्ट राइफल देना,
the way they are buying guns,
और साथ में एक कार्टन गोली भी दे देना।
भाई
ये ऐसा खरीदते हैं।
the way the people are stockpiling weapons, it's like civil war होना है भाई, मतलब, and yet they think कि civil war यहाँ होगा, यहाँ बंदूक किसके पास कितना है भाई, doesn't make sense to me. But their intellectual class will make questions over here, हाँ, like यहाँ civil war यहाँ होगा इंडिया में, this is the kind of
भाई
stupidity they
अमेरिका
have.
की इंटेलेक्चुअल क्लास के बारे में तो बात जितना कम ही करे अच्छा है, क्योंकि
But
उनका इंटेलेक्चुअल
even
क्लास है
worse is the South Asian
कैलिफोर्निया।
origin intellectual class. Even worse, man.
ये वो
I
तो
don't know
हम
what
तो
to say.
शीप है भैया, हम फॉलो करते जो अगला इंसान बोल रहा है वहां पे भी यूएस।
एटलीस्ट हम अब उतना फॉलो नहीं कर रहे हैं. देयर इज स्टिल
नहीं
स्पेस
इंडिया
गिवन
में
फॉर
नहीं,
डिफरेंस. हाँ,
इंडिया में
ओके,
नहीं,
या राइट राइट
यूएस
राइट.
वाले
हाँ,
यूएस वाले।
दे आर या.
हाँ, तो
अच्छा,
मेरा
मेरे को
पॉइंट
एक
ये है ना
क्वेश्चन
कि
पूछना था,
जो
क्योंकि इस हिसाब से अभी चाइना में तो रियल एस्टेट का बबल आ गया है, राइट? एंड देयर सीम्स टू बी अ लॉट ऑफ लाइक प्रॉब्लम्स दैट आर कमिंग अप. And but from what I know is that India is one of the largest markets of Chinese manufacturing, particularly जितना मुझे पता है estimated $100 billion का market है चाइना का इंडिया में. Has the Indian government done anything to, like I have known the fact that they have certainly banned certain things, like we have this Alibaba case where the government simply banned this organization because they were violating tax laws in India, right? So has the Indian government taken any more proactive steps in, basically like hedging against the Chinese? But
Look,
अगर
Can I,
हाँ, मैं बस एक चीज
Anand,
बोलता हूँ, फिर आप आ
you
जाना.
take that, नहीं नहीं, you take
हाँ.
that question, you take
हम्म.
that question because
हम्म.
I won't be able to answer it. मेरा
Right.
एक ही शॉर्ट कमेंट है,
हम्म.
पैसा लो, फैक्ट्री डालो, सामान बनाओ. बाकी सारा जो लॉजिकल जिम्नास्टिक्स और फाइनेंशियल जिम्नास्टिक्स चल रहा है ना, ये तमाशा बंद करो भैया. ठीक है, आपको पता है क्या करना है, फैक्ट्री डालो, सामान बनाओ, और कोई इसका कोई और ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं. प्लीज अनंत, गो अहेड.
Yeah, so about the Chinese and the Indian trade relationship, until the Trump administration came, the Chinese were our biggest trading partners. Again, this was something which the Chinese were very much fine with, and the Indians, because we were not that much interested in trying to shelf or shake up things. Until Trump came, we were also fine with this whole arrangement. But in 2018, things shifted. We allowed more interest and more influence, and in fact, more trade deals with the Americans, and they have now successfully become our largest trading partner, replacing the Chinese. Briefly in 2020, the Chinese came up again. I think because most of our medicines, which we were importing and also exporting, they were being made in China. There was a supply shock, and the Chinese, briefly in the first half of COVID, benefited a lot, right? But now the Americans are back again. So we have made sure that our dependence over China when it comes to trade has reduced, while also taking in certain manufactural aspects, right? तो वो तो हम कर ही रहे हैं. Ban or no ban is a different matter. Ban is more like based on the kind of information storage that the Chinese do. So that has little to do with trade. That has more to do with national security. Also, you had certain cases of espionage where the Chinese were very much interested in getting to know certain plans of certain places in and around certain delicate areas at the border, mainly at the northwestern border, which is a very interesting thing to look at. एक हमारा अपना दिल्ली से ही बंदा पकड़ा गया था, उस टाइम पे भी मैंने ये लास्ट ईयर रेज किया था कि देखो, our non-left is very ill-equipped when it comes to also having intellectuals, because that guy was also used to be a part of VIF, and VIF is a completely pro BJP or pro RSS run international think tank, sorry, IR think tank, और वो वहाँ का बंदा था जो अरेस्ट हुआ था for spying for the Chinese. So you see, this was a problem. So our more concern has been when it comes to ban, it is to do with, now it is to do with flouting of laws. Earlier it was to do with national security. Also in Diwali, these guys had a terrible loss because we had decided to make our own crackers and whatnot. So in our sense, it is a more step-by-step approach. Even in certain places where they were sending their sponsored deals to help make metros and other projects, we have emphasized more over investment from local organizations or Indian companies, or an American or a European company, rather than the Chinese. So this is a systematic thing which we are trying to do. We've already started this a long time back. तो इन चीज़ों पे अभी हम फोकस्ड हैं. वो बैन वैन तो सारा अलग रीजन की वजह से.
अच्छा, मैं ना एक छोटी सी चीज़ ऐड करना चाहता हूँ इसी इसी के कंटिन्यूएशन में, कि while I am not too keen on IPEF, and I don't know if he'll succeed or not. This is my personal opinion on it, obviously. Maybe it will. Hopefully, something positive comes out of it. But there are reasons to believe that even RCEP will not be as much of a success as they are projecting it to be, right? So this leaves only one option, in my view, is that it doesn't matter whether other countries think or not that India should be an alternative or not. India has to be an alternative away from any kind of interest in terms of this cooperation or this cooperative organization or this forum or that forum. You have to you can be a part of it, okay, but your economic ambitions should not be dictated by what other people or other countries are thinking about you. Just pursue this path of just going into the manufacturing sector. Put your hands where your mouth is, right? If you cannot do the China thing, at least do the Bangladesh thing, man. Produce, manufacture. It's the only way out. It's going to cheapen things in your country also. And if you, in the near future, in 20, 25 years, 30 years even, if you can be the world's factory 2.0, nothing like it. No regional cooperative organizations, none of these fora, this is not going to solve things. This is our problem. We have to, you know, we have to essentially man up. We have to show that we are up to the task. And we have to find certain creative policy innovations so as to accommodate the shifting manufacturing sector from China. That is the only answer, in my view. Thank you.
That's interesting. But of course, this whole thing has a lot of challenges with the way automation has come up, right? Even 3D printing has come up and everything else. So we'll have to rethink on this whole manufacturing model, because that can be understandable, because the technologies of Fordism or assembly line manufacturing was pretty much understandable in 90s and 80s. But at the present moment, the kind of technologies that are coming up, and the point kind of technologies are coming up, they are less human intensive, they are less labor intensive day by day. So that we'll have to also think along those lines.
That still doesn't mean that um, I mean, as it is, we are not in the manufacturing sector to that extent. We are in other jobs.
Yes.
So Indians are getting employed in other places.
Yeah,
हाँ, अब हमारे यहाँ भी unemployment का
it's a
problem
strange
है.
kind of
But
lopsided economic growth
yeah,
we had.
but
We did not
but if you
follow the classical manufacturing to service economy
yeah,
paradigm, right?
but look, what I'm saying is, if you set up a factory, let us say that it's the most futuristic factory ever and only automation is there and everything. Factory still requires electricity, requires water. Any factory,
Hmm.
right? So why not provide the cheapest option in India? If we can subsidize a space program, if we can subsidize our farming sector, why can't we subsidize this? It's only going to benefit us,
And
nobody
I
else.
think the Indian side is actively interested in this. They're just because you see, like you said, with the Indian approach, it is less about authoritativeness and more about a mutual, palatable understanding with other allies. Want to do this. They know they will do this. They don't care. In fact, there was chatter. Now, what chatter is basically unverified, but certain sources from in and out of the ministry who give bits and tidbits to a few of their people who are connected with. There was chatter that if Quad does not work well and if there is no indication, the Indians might just leave it by the end of this year. Okay, so the Indians are more or less ready for it, and they know that regardless of Quad and this particular framework, we need to increase our manufacturing process. That goes without saying. The only
Yes.
point where I raised this question about the allies is because you see, to emulate or to even imitate a Chinese model, you need a push of another superpower. The Chinese got it when the Soviets were on decline by the Americans, and Kissinger was the architect of it. Later on, Kissinger made it a point that now that the Soviets are in decline in Asia and even in Europe, and now you're supporting the Chinese economically to grow, you need to not go and overstep boundaries, which is why you have this crisis in Ukraine. So the point is that if you need to grow to that level, and of course policy changes is number one. Number two, you need to have certain um, not 100%, but at least a positive support from certain allies who understand the Chinese danger. And that is where I see that there is a lack of it, which is why I am also very skeptical about both these organizations, no matter this is stage 2 or stage 1 of the QSD, or this is stage one for the IPEF. But regardless of it, I am still hopeful, and I mean, I have to be hopeful because it's
अरे
a
अनहद,
wonderful world, no?
तुम बात कर रहे हो, जनरल साहब जी न्यूज पे बोल रहे थे कि चाइना को उड़ा देंगे, ठीक है?
कौन सा जनरल भाई?
No, I'm not naming names, okay?
don't name
But
them.
I'm making a generalized statement, okay? कि हम सफाया कर
राइट।
देंगे, खत्म कर देंगे, गायब हो
यार
जाएगा
वो
कंट्री।
वो तो कल के भी रूम में बोला होगा बहुत लोगों ने, यार देखो चाइना को उड़ा देंगे, ये कर देंगे, वो करो भाई, मेरे को कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, एवरीबडी हैज देयर वंडरफुल ड्रीम, ओके, बट इट इज टू सून टू से। लुक, आई विल गिव अनदर एग्जांपल एंड मे बी आयुष कैन कम एंड ही कैन वैलिडेट माय एग्जांपल्स. Two to three organizations I'll mention. One is the SCO, Shanghai Corporation. The other is BRICS, and the third, it's not even an organization. It's part of BRICS. It's an initiative by BRICS. It's called the Asian Development Bank. You compare them with IPEF and with Quad, you'll see the level of success there. Those organizations spearheaded by the let's add CPEC also, One Belt and Road is more or less halved in its ambition now. They cannot move forward because of certain other reasons, but CPEC is growing,
It'll
right?
half even more.
Yeah, it'll have even more. But there is this proposed, you remember, Kamraj, in the Myanmar room, there is this proposed road that the Chinese are proposing with the Indians from their region in the Yunnan province, I believe, to somewhere in India and then straight away to Myanmar and also possibly to Bangladesh. So
Yep,
the
yep.
Chinese led organizations more or less don't have a policy paralysis problem because they're authoritative in nature, and they don't give a I mean, even they don't care about other allies, but the rest of the allies don't have much of an option, right? यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है कि in Quad and in IPEF, the problem is that the Americans don't respect भी क्या, they don't listen to the problems or the issues faced by the other allies. And if they want, tomorrow they can, with a snap of a finger, end Quad's all progress. Constructive dialogue, which our Prime Minister said, was just for the sake of optics. Even he understands that this is an unstable organization. So that is where you see the whole success rate is where I worry, but I also feel optimistic that at least the Americans recognize what the Chinese did. And it might feel hawkish for me to say that, look, the Americans recognize, now we can be in peace. And I might be repeating what most people in that room yesterday were saying, but no, I am not. I am just saying that it is a brief step by step process. If the Americans do this, it might it might renew our progress and might help us build bridges with certain nations which may or may not have the Chinese influence. Like, I'll give another example. A few weeks ago, we had sent certain people from our foreign ministry to Laos, Cambodia, and one or two other northern ASEAN nations to have certain conversations with them. And I'm pretty sure they also had the discussion of China there. So this is happening if we have the American side slightly in favor, not completely, but slightly in favor. So these are small steps. Ayush bhai, please.
Uh, so that is actually a boon of, let's say, Quad, right? Which I've been saying this, that Quad has actually given us the platform for India particularly to involve in a much parallel penetrative bilateral to bilateral relationship, which has actually yielded India a result as well. Now, when I look into particularly United States of America engagement into the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, I believe you need to understand the situation of geopolitics and geoeconomics simultaneously. And you need to understand that what has been a domestic problem of United States of America in terms of the geoeconomics, but because in terms of the politics, there has been loss. There has been enough. So you look into at present, United States of America inflation is on the rise, as other countries' inflation is also on the rise. But compared to the other countries, United States of America inflation is on rise, and it's on decade high. It's on decade high for the very first time after 1981 to 1982. You look into after that, there has been a certain crisis which United States of America is facing in terms of the geoeconomics, because their geoeconomics has been hugely dependent upon the Arab world, has been hugely dependent upon the European turf. And when you look into European turf, that even a country called Spain have actually registered inflation. So that speaks volume to the fact that how inflation is actually penetrated each and every country. So United States of America geoeconomical dependency either has been on the bilateral to bilateral basis, or either has been to one association or to one organization.
And let's take Europe as an association. The problem came after 24th of February, when the so-called, even Antonio Guterres has been mentioning this for a while now, that the so-called invasion of Russia into Ukraine has actually triggered a food crisis. And that is something which has also impacted United States of America in terms of the food inflation, because the so-called bread basket of the world, that is Ukraine, cannot actually export, and cannot actually export the wheat products, cannot actually export the agriculture products, because the port has been hijacked by the Russians, and so is with the Russians as well. So looking into all this, United States of America has actually suffered from the European side. Now from the Arab world, the case is absolutely different. Arab world is actually going through a transition phase, as I say, and this involves a pan transition phase of the Arab world. Earlier we used to refer that, okay, you see United Arab Emirates policy change, but I can refer to a trilateral policy change, which includes the association of Saudi Arabia, which includes the United Arab Emirates, and also to that of to that of Israel, or the whole Abraham Accord, as one can say, and the other includes Bahrain and the Qatar into the matter. So what they have done specifically is they're actually going through a transition phase now, and their sorry, their dependency on United States of America has been lowered. The reason behind is because the economy of the Arab world want to diversify themselves. They wanted to change themselves from the non-renewable to that of the renewable, and also with that they want further accessibility to the eastern part of the Europe, and that is the only reason that why Abraham Accord was done. Many people say that Abraham Accord was actually to so-called accept the Alaska Moss, to actually create this so-called movement between the Arab world to that of the Israel. But no, it was something which people say into the global forum. But strategically, it was for diversification of economy. Along with that, Arab world wanted that Israel must act as an opening door for them in order to access the eastern part of the Europe, which to be very frank is now a shattered idea because of the war which has been happening and the migrant crisis which has been happening. Who can forget the December crisis of 2021, where Poland and Belarus suffered? Alexander Lukashenko and the Duda came into conflict because of the migrant crisis. So there has been a certain thing. Since Arab is going through a transitory phase, United States of America is suffering a loss. Now, the thing that United States of America expect is that Indo-Pacific can actually turn out to be their survivor. Now, but the problem of United States of America in Indo-Pacific is that United States of America reach in Indo-Pacific is bilateral to bilateral basis. That is with India, that is with Australia, and that is with Fumio Kishida government in Japan, and with the other very limiting agents from ASEAN, and that from the Sun government, that is from South Korea. So looking into that, United States of America thought that it's a right platform to create an association of so-called Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, which somehow the other may actually help United States of America to not in terms of geoeconomics, but also in the geopolitics. The reason behind economical strings always lead to a political string. Solomon Island, Kiribati, Vanuatu is example of Chinese success of political gain into the region. So that is how United States of America thought. So that has been a reason. And now the question that we need to ask to ourselves is how much time it will take for India to actually even be the competitor for the Chinese in terms of the manufacturing. I believe that is what Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, in his positivity, or when you look into the positivity of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, it will actually help India to access with the other powers, access with the countries who are quite bit anonymous in terms of the Indian relationships. But also with that, India relationship with that countries must not turn political in nature, which actually may welcome the other belligerents from China. So that is somehow the other. Here comes the pragmatism of India in that terms. And I believe that India would be happy to accept the geo-economics from that country, rather turning this and advancing this into the geopolitics, which I believe that it is 20 or 15 years more to come for this. And that are my points, Anand. We have Sanji as well.
In fact, it'll take more than 20 to 30
Yeah.
years. It's going to take a long time because even now, if you look at, I think Maldives is a good example that our economic relationship has turned into a nice political relationship also. But in Sri Lanka, the problem still remains. And looking at the size of Sri Lanka and then looking at countries bigger than Sri Lanka in the Indo-Pacific, it is doubtful that until there is a strong policy push, though nothing much can be achieved on this, and the belligerents will always come. But I'm hoping that besides the whole nitty-gritties of both IPEF and Quad or QSD, the basic paranoia with regards to the Chinese plays a role, and that is where I think the Indians can bank upon. Kamu?
Anhad, I'm sorry to bring this up, but I don't know what has happened to me. I've started looking at all Sri Lankans as some sort of a version of Chamat. Chamat
Who?
from Facebook. Chamat Ratnayake. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the stereotype that I've built in my
No,
head, you
no,
know.
it is very much
And
evident.
yeah,
Yeah, the local
yeah,
courts are
yeah.
demanding 1 crore for a captured fisherman. It is a behavioral problem, but but
By
chalo, anyway. Go ahead.
every Sinhala guy is chamat or what? Like I don't understand this. And the government also like demanding such like भाई मतलब थोड़ा सा मतलब हैसियत के हिसाब से मतलब so so these things are there, but um, I mean I don't know, I mean we are seeing like all these developments right now happening in the Indo-Pacific. One hopes that there is some measure of success with this. Uh, in my view, economics is not the answer to a strategic and a militaristic problem. It has to be approached in that manner. Don't pretend that this alignment is something other than that, because that is when people will start getting suspicious and just check out. Um, I don't know. See, I am like shooting arrows in the dark here, but I wonder how the Japanese were able to do it. Like that's a very interesting model to explore. In the sense that we all know that after the war, after the Second World War, the Americans sort of took over the country. They even like quote unquote aided in the drafting of the Constitution of Japan, and all of that is there. But despite of this, Japan emerged as a power unto its own, and it was the first Asian country in that sense to really embrace the idea of manufacturing and then later services. And because there was nothing in the way of like to explain to them that how do you cheapen the quality of the products that you manufacture, so the manufacturing in Japan was of a very high quality, second only to I would say German products at that time. And so you have a sort of a sense in Japan that quality is always preferred over quantity in every aspect, not just for like things which are like smartphones and technology. Not just that. I mean, you even have a Japanese candy will taste different from all the candies found around the entire world. It's just better quality of everything, right? I mean, that's processed food essentially. So my point is that one must look at Japan in that sense, that how you can cooperate with a super so-called now former superpower like the Americans are, who are sort of willing to share technology and whatnot for the sake of mid-level manufacturing of their products, so that it sort of makes it cheaper. And also we have to explore on how we can sort of frame automation in terms of manufacturing into our evolving nature of our economics, and how we can sort of integrate automation into our manufacturing sector also, and to what extent will should we be able to do. And also there's a bigger thing here, is that is it cheaper to manufacture with actual people in India, or will automation cost more, at least in the preliminary stages? I know that the purpose is to like cheapen the job itself, right? I mean, so that the human element is removed, but I don't think it'll completely happen, right? At least in the beginning, and the opportunity is in front of us right now, so we must act in that manner as such. So exploring how the Japanese were able to stand their ground regardless of the fact that the Americans basically ran their country for a bit, right? And in this process they shared technology and everything with them. And if they can do it, I mean we can at least achieve a part of it, right? So that is, I feel that that's an interesting area to
No,
cooperate with the
certainly
Japanese
that's
on.
an important observation. And I want you to look at the chat once, and this is exactly the problem with the Indian understanding of Indo-Pacific. Okay? And not just understanding, but researching about it. ठीक है? So the whole point here is why we made this room is to not just talk about क्या बोलूं मैं, certain political goals and people with whom we have differences with, if they are Chinese or Indian shills, but to understand what is the basic mindset behind the nations involved in this. And this is certainly what we are trying to do here. You're right about everything, Kamraj. And one more thing, the Americans might be interested in sharing technology, but they are certainly not interested in agreeing with the demand of demilitarizing Japan, which is a very strong demand of this organization, the Nippon Kaigi, to which the Abe is still an advisor to. But anyway, Umesh ji is here, and even Nariel is in. Nariel, just look at the chat, and uske baad we'll give our final comments. Umesh ji, anything to speak about this issue?
Uh, yeah, I'm just listening to this thing. So basically, this framework, whatever it has been drafted and India is joining it, basically, I think it will act as a insurance policy against the CPP, TPP, and RCEP. And India is not part of any of this, both of the alliance. Joining this alliance, being part, is good for India. The economic integration with the Asia Pacific is not there collectively, but India has individual pacts with all the countries, very good pacts, and it suits India to be out and in. And this alliance gives, from an Indian strategic point of view, is the best thing which could happen. Things about Quad being a defunct organization, it's not that. Even if you see the all the three leaders, uh, maybe Joe Biden and Anthony Albanese and uh, Fumio Kishida. They have all been replaced since the Quad became more operational in 2019-20. Modi is the only leader who has survived this. What do you say? Who has been in who has been a long-standing leader. So basically, I am seeing that maybe right now Quad may be looking as a defunct organization, but it has a roadmap of becoming a potentially economic NATO, as China has also called it. It will be acting as a insurance policy against RCEP and CPP, TPP as well, if China tries to bully any of the neighbors. Because what is happening here is all the countries, apart from America, share territorial boundaries and they have ongoing disputes with China. So China has been weaponizing trade to their advantage. This alliance will actually provide a framework that if China goes rogue again, like in 2020 when they tried to uh, uh, when they decided not to import coal from Australia and many other commodities. So at that time, India and many other countries pitched in. I think even from Taiwan, they stopped importing pineapple, which Japan came and they started importing it. So basically, that it is that economic framework has been established. Also, one more thing is this is a Quad plus. It's an extension of Quad as well. You can say that maybe there will be many other layers in which it it will function as a many other layers of economic layers. More important, I would have loved if there would have been a military alliance and something like that. There, if they had been in clarity, but seems that everybody wants to avoid having a confrontation with China directly, but indirectly they are taking steps to integrate each other. That is the best of the policy as well. So maybe fine. It looks like everything is hunky dory, but for the moment it is advantage China because all the three leaders who have been replaced, they do not share the same values as Narendra Modi, Trump, Shinzo Abe, and Morrison had. If all these three leaders had remained there, Quad would have been a very powerful organization. Now we have a docile set of leaders who are not so hawkish on China, but they would like to because the security framework of those country will not allow them to have a soft stand, so they have been forced to take these measures. So, right, I believe that these are just cosmetic measures in the short term, but there is some framework which it can become a potent, maybe in future.
Amazing, brilliant points. The first point I completely agree with you is the fact that the other nations are unstable, whereas India, because of the current Prime Minister's popularity, remains on the stable path of demanding and understanding what it gets from Quad. And that is exactly my point, that the Indians don't lose anything even if they have to leave Quad, because they have a proper understanding as to what to do. We don't have this democratic crisis here. We rather have a more democidal crisis here, but that is a good crisis in my opinion. The one place I might kind of disagree with you is that these nations, all of the members here, have openly not quoted a direct confrontation. India has certainly done its bit. In fact, quite recently, both the defense minister and the external affairs minister were very, very candid with regard to the Chinese aggression. In fact, the external affairs minister mentioned that the build-up at our border is 10 times more than what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, but nobody seems to care, so we don't also care. And Rajnath Singh was very clear that if China threatens us, we know how to respond. And even recently, the Pangong So, they were trying to build a bridge, and we have retaliated also by announcing that we have made a direct road through Kalapani to Mansarovar. So the whole issue where this supposedly comedian person in the comment chat box, who was trying to say that Nepal is the ancient nation, our dependency over Nepal also reduces there. So that is the only disagreement I have, but the rest of it is very much on point. Actually, the thing is that QSD or Quad as we know it is actually military, and it was supposed to be military, and this is where again the instability factor comes in, that they keep dilly-dallying over whether should we make it more aggressive in military or just subtle in the military quotient. We are of the opinion that yes, military drills and everything and sharing information is clear. I think he has left. Oh, he's back. And military deals and shares are good, but direct confrontation is what each nation must take on its own. Whereas the problem, essentially, as you pointed out well, lies with Australia, Japan, and America because of the political, chopping and changing that is happening there. So you're right about it, and this is somewhere I also feel that if the Indians take a lead in Quad, it would have been better because it's a local, country. It understands the region in a better sense. I think it has a better understanding. And it would also benefit us to be the bigger manufacturing hub. But that is just hearsay. But the rest of your points are completely online, and this is where while I have differences in the domestic policy on many issues, on the global and the foreign policy aspect, where I'm also a PG scholar, I agree with the Indian position in many aspects, especially in Quad. And I understand that the Indian side also understands this, that if later on Quad does not function well, they can always have another option and they can always bring in their own aspect. And there's always the project of the Solar Alliance. That is completely an Indian project. And you have a lot of Nordic nations now joining up. It won't be a surprise if oceanic regions also come up, right? Anyway, we have a new
Um,
speaker, Akash, and Gamraj, you wanted to say
One
something?
more point.
yeah, I'm just
One more point. One more point I would like to say. I agree to your point that India had given a suitable response, but what would happen is we need to now show the spine to take on China proactively rather than reactively. Last year, I loved that when the Indian Prime Minister greeted Dalai Lama, and it was really a very good sign. So we need to make these issues alive. And right now, China may be looking. It is an advantage China showing, but it doesn't mean that we are out of the game as well. Individually, we have progressed. Collectively, as a quad, we have not progressed. We are being treated as a quo ante. And the only country which has the land border, 3,480 kilometers of land border we are sharing. The militarized militarization, as you have stated, it is very high. 250,000 soldiers inside with all the capabilities. Besides, air force are ready. So it is a slightest provocation can include a full-fledged war, which I think both the countries are keen to avoid, because none of the country would like to destabilize other. Because the only country which can match China in man-to-man combat in any other thing is India. And in case China decides to go rogue or anything like that, right now I believe that we are sufficiently placed to strike deep inside China, in the territories where the economic development is very high, and it has been instrumental in the growth of China, because China is around. I have no qualms in admitting that they are a very economic powerhouse, 5 to 6 times the GDP of us, but in a controlled, mutual, assured destruction, the loser will be China rather than India, because we are just on a cusp of growth. We are in the catalyst of growth. We are just started, and they are already progressing, and they would not like to have an open showdown with India. They might try to prick India by what do you say, by promoting countries like Pakistan, like Pakistan to inflict wounds on India. But China will definitely not have a direct confrontation. They cannot afford, because this country has borders with 17 other countries, and apart from Pakistan and Afghanistan, they probably have the dispute with each and every country, and they have the military is just 2.1 million. India is 1.4 million. So China is in a very precarious situation, and India should utilize all the resources at its disposal. And you're right. And India, Japan, and Australia last year had formed a supply chain mechanism where they would try to, what you say, dealing their supply systems from China. And India and Russia are already working in the Far East, in the Vladivostok project as well. And I believe that India's independent, this defunct cord is actually, uh, uh, what do you say, uh, what would I call it? I'm not getting the word. It's a blessing in disguise for India to have an independent sovereign policy, and it helps it to chart its own course at the international forum. Thank you.
Yes, I was just making a short remark. I am really interested in finding out how Nepal is the oldest country in the history of Asia, of the entire world, and the universe. Like, मतलब क्या है यार ये लोग का मतलब क्या बोलूँ मैं यार I don't understand this logic, but okay, whatever.
हाँ भाई,
Guys,
ओल्डेस्ट
I
कंट्री
have
है,
a
लॉजिक को
question.
मान लो.
Yes, Akashi.
Guys, I have a question. Can I go ahead? So, talking about Quad and the four countries that we spoke about, but I just wanted to understand now we lost a lot of ground in Nepal, and Sri Lanka is now in a crisis economically. But Modi had gone to Nepal recently, and he met with the Prime Minister, if I'm not wrong. So where do we stand? Have we gotten better with the situation in Nepal? Can someone give me like actual facts and events,
We
or
have,
have we gone?
we have. Ever since the change in leadership, we have. Even the Prime Minister of Nepal made a visit here. The first place he visited was the BJP headquarters. He was welcomed by JP Nadda. So, in terms of engagement, we have. I think Nepal has also expressed interest in taking the UPI in terms of payments in its domestic produce, and the whole monetary aspect that comes into play with the Russians, because obviously why not? So we have made a jump after the leadership has changed, and the fact that the Prime Minister visited Nepal during Purnima itself signifies that when KP Oli was in charge, the Prime Minister and KP Oli never looked eye to eye, and KP Oli had this habit of making irresponsible statements. The current Prime Minister from the Nepalese Congress is very guarded in his approach, and he understands. In fact, not just him. There was a certain article in the Indian Express where the Nepalese ambassador to India had highlighted that our growth and our trade with India, regardless of whatever happens in the international arena, remains the most robust and has to increase and continue in the same way as it was. So, not only I believe that is an admission on the part of the Nepalese that during the communist rule, which ended recently, there was a problem between India and Nepal, but it also reinforced that under the Nepalese Congress, they will have a much better relationship. And that was signified that the Prime Minister went there very recently before he made his trip for Quad, right? So I think it has very nicely improved. And that is exactly another concern for the Chinese because they have lost ground over there. So we're losing ground over there. And that is where I see that if this gamble of our good bilateral push works in the Indo Pacific, even countries in South Asia can be influenced to have closer ties with us. So, yes, that should answer the question.
Just to add to Akash questions of Nepal ties with that of the India, you need to know one thing that time was absolutely very different when KP Oli Sharma was in regime with Nepal. To be very frank, Xi Jinping had a clear-cut strings that he used to control with KP Oli Sharma, and that is why you look into the statement that has been coming from Nepal. I know a couple of statements, which includes that where he openly said that the COVID actually was something which was originated from India. That is what he said. And he even said many lines which I do not want to mention out here because it would be political. So that would be something which, to be very frank, they had a clear-cut tiltation to that of the Chinese. But things have changed when Sher Bahadur Duba has came in. And the one of the recent progress that you need to know as of now is Nepal have actually joined the International Solar Alliance as well. And this kind of deal actually bring Nepal and India in terms of close proximity as well. And look, there has been Nepal is our seasoned player in terms of the economical partners as well, and thus close ties in terms of the geopolitics was something which we offer. Now, moving to the next question of you, Akash, that is the Sri Lanka crisis. Look, I wanted to refer a statement that has come from the Indian side back in the days of second half of 2021, where Indian government actually said before to the economical crisis of Sri Lanka, when actually KP Oli Sharma was in regime in Nepal, the Indian administration, the Foreign External Ministry of India, and the bureaucrats involved into that have openly said that Sri Lanka, it's Nepal who must learn something from Sri Lanka. That is what Indian government actually said in terms of maintaining its ties, in terms of actually controlling their foreign policy. That was something which was a very interesting line which came from India. Now, when you look into the economical crisis of Sri Lanka, I believe, because of the development that has been seen and that has been coming from Rajapaksa, that is primary. And the second responsible factor is also to that of the Chinese invasion into the geoeconomics of Sri Lanka. But one of the thing which, to be very frank, is quite common between Pakistan, is quite common to Sri Lanka, which has actually led down to so-called economical retardation of that nations. Even I believe that Pakistan is on the verge of collapse in terms of the economical, in terms of the geoeconomics. The reason is that what these countries of Sri Lanka actually did, they tried to replicate the Chinese model of development, or they try to replicate the Chinese model of infrastructure. Look, I believe this is an old school orthodox principles of the evolution of the geoeconomics that you need to actually follow, and you need to actually replicate each and every development that has been done by the other countries. You need to first respect your own standards. And I see a clear cut difference between Sri Lanka and between China in terms of one thing, that is capacity. Means Chinese have 1.4 billion capacity, so as India, and that is why Chinese are the second largest economy in terms of the geoeconomics, and so as India in terms of that. But the other countries, which to be very frank are on the economical retardation, they did not value down their productivity, they didn't value down their capacity, because it's good to actually replicate the model of CPEC in Pakistan, it's good to replicate the so-called Hambantota port development and the other port development in Sri Lanka, but the things have actually changed in when they actually try to do it at present. But now India has given the so-called 2 billion line of credit to Sri Lanka, and the situation was, at present is very similar to that of the past. But I believe in terms of the Nepal, things have actually turned in for a brighter future between India and Nepal since Sher Bahadur Duba came into power.
Yeah, I don't have that view on Nepal. Some of my friends already know that. Um, I think Mr. Deva is like a compromise prime minister, who is a product of compromise between the Nepali Congress as well as both the CPNs, and being from the second largest party in the Nepali parliament, and because the political machinations and internal domestic deals, Mr. Deva was able to come into power. Of course, Indians are happy about his stance and whatnot, but frankly, I think he's doing these things because right now Nepal is undergoing through a crisis. ठीक है, whatever comes our way, this is, I like to call them a bad brother, you know. This is a country which is a brother, but not always, like, with the best of intentions in mind. Every family has one such brother or sister, family member, like, who is a bit deviant. So uh, Adarniya Nepal ji is also like that. um, so the problem, yeah, so the problem here is that right now, they're cozying up to you. Tomorrow they might not be, and because both the CPNs are a part of their political reality today, we are in the age of, I don't know what, like 21st, like, constitution of Nepal or something. Their current constitution is called the Constitution of Nepal 2015. And this actually goes into a sort of an explanation wherein you start thinking that, do both the CPNs actually want Nepal to be a liberal or a representative democracy, or a people's democracy, which is part and parcel of every Communist Party's vision. So, in that sense, I have no qualms about it. Nepalis are still pretty close and pretty tight with the Chinese, because there's a heavy investment that has come in from the Chinese. It's not just the political class, but the entrepreneurial class is pretty much in close contact, and they've got a lot of skin in the game. So right now they are making overtures, frankly, because if somebody like Mr. Deva does it, we will believe it, or, like, we will, at least if not believe it, will accept it, because he's somebody else. Any of the leaders in the CPNs do that, we're just gonna laugh it off. So that is why, in my perception, that is why it is happening. And Nepal, no matter whatever brief political shift we've seen in Nepal right now, is an untrustworthy ally
Uh,
at this point in time.
just want to add one thing. After the massacre which happened in 1999, I think so. At that time, the entire royal family was killed. King Virendra Singh or something. I don't remember. Nepal has gone in the
So 2000, I think. You're talking about the
No,
Nepalese royal massacre, right?
you're
Exactly.
talking about King Birendra.
Ah,
King Birendra.
yes,
ha,
yes,
yeah, yeah. 2000. Yeah.
yeah, 99 2000. Yeah, whenever it happened, from that time, it abolished its monarchy, and it started trying to aid the West and imbibe the secular values. Was actually a ploy to destroy the fabric, the culture of this Hindu nation. And right now, what we are seeing is the same thing which is happening in India in the Dravidian states, in which where there is the people are trying to, some forces, the anti-national forces, are trying to change the character of this country by ridiculing all the ancient culture and trying to implement the Western culture in the name of liberal values and other bullshits and other things. Nepal is going through that phase only. So I believe that they are misguided nation, and the youth of that country uh, are now they just feel that having Chinese support will help them to uh, satisfy their material aspirations and other things. But you know what has happened in Sri Lanka? Petrol is 420 rupees today, and Nepal is going the same way. They are going to suffer. They will definitely suffer because of this Chinese alliance. Because China, being alliance with China will never lend you economic prosperity. It will bring you turmoils, and they will also encroach your territory also, and you will become a client state of China. Pakistan is also another example. Even Bangladesh, they also took loans, and right now they are also 6 months away from what what Sri Lanka is right now, and many other countries, even Argentina, Peru, are all. on the verge of there are economic problems erupting all over the world. So we don't need to do anything. We don't need to classify them anything. Let them come and say that whatever they want. And you know how Oli was honey trapped by the ambassador. So everybody knows that the Nepal lacks a very good leadership. They need somebody who is nationalist, and the country is extremely divided as well. In spite of having a potential of being the second largest hydroelectricity power, they are not able to tap the potential. So it's wrong choices. Yes, when the Congress was there, yeah, India deliberately neglected Nepal as well. So we should also accept our responsibility of using Nepal as and when we want. I have seen people. Sorry if I'm being very rude. I would accept wherever we are wrong as well. It was happened during the Congress regime and the BJP regime. Whenever they are trying to repair the fences, but right now it seems that in under the Oli administration, the Nepal was a gone case. Right now there is a compromise candidate. He seems to be a neutral person, but how long? We don't know. So let us leave them to their fate. Let us not say anything to them. Their karma will speak to them. Thank you.
Right. I hope, Akash, your questions were addressed. Right. Um,
Yes,
Anything else you
understood.
want to ask? Then we can go to
Uh,
Ashutosh ji and
I just
Varshika ji.
wanted to ask, so Gamraj, who had the other side of the coin, right? So thanks for giving me both sides of the view. So now, Gamraj, when you said China has invested a lot and that becomes a concrete relationship over, say, just talking about cultural bonds and few other things. So can you just list out those strategic and concrete investments that China has had in Nepal, which makes Nepal closer to China in at least the short term right now?
भाई अभी तो मेरे पास कोई अभी लिस्ट नहीं है बट the thing is there is an ongoing competition of investment in Nepal between the Americans and the Nepali and the Chinese. uh, and from my personal experiences on the matter, I've seen that it is not members of the Chinese entrepreneurial class that is just entering into China with heavy investments. It is not even state representatives from the PRC. It is members of the Communist Party who carry the flag of the CPC behind them whenever they sit for any important meeting with reasonably large entrepreneurs in Nepal today. So नेपाल के अंदर भाई चाइना से अच्छा खासा पैसा आ रहा है and you'll hear this kind of rhetoric in Nepal that we have three neighbors. We have two land neighbors and a sky neighbor. uh, I mean, the sky neighbor is of the Americans who will come with UFOs to abduct people and their cows and whatnot. So, and this is based on the perception that the Americans are also interested in us now. Everybody is interested. We are the most important country in the world right now. There's lots of domestic problems going on in the country, and I am of the view that it is not the governments, and I say that with a plural, with an S. The governments or the respective governments of Nepal are not responsible for whatever is happening in Nepal. It is the Nepalese people who constantly elect absolute morons into power that have led to this situation. I don't know if that country was even prepared for anything other than monarchy. Um, Anyway, we can't do anything much in that way either. Also,
Gamraj, Gamraj,
I'm,
Gamraj,
I
Gamraj,
am, sir, sir.
one second, one second. Please do not make such remarks against the Nepalese. We in India also
Why,
had near regime of UPA. We were also a lost decade.
why can I not make it? What
No, no,
remarks
no,
have I
no, no.
made?
Please don't do
No,
that.
why? What? One second, sir. What remark did I make?
देखिए उनका वो ऐसा ही है नेपाली
Umesh,
पीपल
sir, please explain to me what remark did I make?
नहीं आपने ये बोला ना कि नेपाली पीपल आर मेकिंग आर रेस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर एवरीथिंग एंड अदर थिंग्स आई कैन से ओनली
But
वन
it is
थिंग
true.
one second that's why I'm telling you even Indians were like that in between 2004
No,
and
no,
14
look, sir,
one
I
second
am.
one second one
No,
second
no,
sir
no, sir, 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 please, please, please,
no
please,
no no
very
sir
rest.
just wait
Sir,
just
sir,
wait a
you're.
minute sir just
Sir,
wait a minute sir Gamraj one second I would also say that if you say that Nepalese people have been like this, Indians were there the same thing in 2004 and 14.
Sir,
This is
very
what I would like to. Maybe
respectfully,
you, maybe
very respect,
maybe you can disagree
sir,
with me.
Umesh
Maybe you
sir,
can disagree with
Umesh
me, please.
sir,
But
Umesh
no, no,
sir,
no. I will
very
not.
respectfully, no, no, you may not endorse it, sir, but then again, I disagree with you. What I'm saying is, it is not the government of Nepal, or whichever successive governments have been formed, that are responsible for like the 100th constitution that has been introduced in Nepal right now. Remember when our prime minister went to Nepal and he was congratulating the people of Nepal in bringing the constitution of Nepal at that time. In Nepali media, things were very different as a response to that. Oh, Narendra Modi cannot tell us, how to draft our constitution. He was congratulating the Nepalese people on the new constitution, right? And this is a country, who has done it, like, I don't know, God knows how many times now. Like, what are you offended at, bro? You can't decide what your constitution is in the first place. Okay, if you want to draft a constitution, and I'm pointing the constitution part very, very responsibly. If you want your state to work as a representative democracy, or even as a people's democracy, as is the case in China, you take your time. Within 2 to 3 years, you resolutely draft a document that runs your country, that runs your state, that dictates terms and conditions and rules of how to run that country. It is open to amendments, like it happened in our case. And there is an ongoing debate on how much of it do we like and how much of it we don't like even today. But we haven't introduced, like, for the 100th time, another constitution, right? Somebody offends us on, like, somebody says, oh, the constitution of India is a joke. I would be really offended, because there's a lot of time, effort, intellect, manpower, so much of it has been invested in that piece of document. It is always open to amendments, it is always open to so many things, right? But it is very telling about the demography of a country when they cannot even come to terms with the fact that they can't even decide how to run their own country, right? So this is the problem. On top of that, I have personal issues with that matter also, because it's an incredibly racist society, and they're not racist to the Chinese, right? I hope you're understanding my meaning here, right? Some of the biggest reasons why the constitutional process has been disrupted is because they have been absolutely vehement over how much powers they want to give to certain ethnic groups and demographies in their country, right? So there is a lot of history involved with Nepal. I am, for one, my personal view on this is, I don't treat them as delicately as most people think, that oh, हमको उनको समझाना चाहिए, मनाना चाहिए. You cannot tell anything of this sort to the Nepalese people. They're not stupid. They actively do these things. I've had experiences with the people of that country and in that country.
Same here.
Okay,
Same.
so don't be fooled by this. Oh, sweet innocent people, misguided youth, and nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I'm sorry, sir. I know. I mean, I'm not
Gamraj,
trying to be. I'm
Gamraj,
not trying to be
I
disrespectful.
understand your
They are,
frustration. Maybe
they
you.
are our
No, no,
neighbors,
second.
so we can understand better than anyone.
Yes, one second, one second. You might have some frustration with them,
अरे भाई,
but
हमारे country को frustration
that
है.
might.
It's
No,
not
no,
just us.
one second,
Sir, please
one second,
understand this, sir. UPA
please,
government, even
one
the
second.
UPA government, when so-called interference in their politics has happened, it is for the interest of our country. It is not because we want to destroy that country from within. You know how anti-India Nepali nationalism is. It is not at one juncture that UPA government embargoed Nepal briefly for one time period. That is why it got anti-India. No, it has always been that way. So see, I mean, I don't expect everybody to take the same kind of stand on Nepal that I do, but I am of the habit of calling a spade when it comes to Nepal. So this is my personal stand on it, and I'm not going to, like, mince words with regard to Nepal and its domestic
Basically, I
politics.
don't. I will not like to say that I will try to hide our failures. Maybe we also elected a moronic government in from 2004 to 14. Let us understand that as well. And now we are on the path of evolution that we are electing a nationalist government. I hope the same thing comes with Nepal. It will come with time. It is a transitionary phase, and I respect the Gurkha regiment as well. They have fought many wars with India. And let's not forget. One second, one
Sir,
second, one second, one
Don't,
second, one second, one
don't.
second, Gamraj. You can laugh, you can do whatever
I
it,
am not
but you
trying to be
can.
condescending, sir. This is
No,
this
no, no,
is
please,
this
please,
is
please,
on
please,
repeat
please, please,
with this thing.
please. We Indians also elected.
Sir, you respect the Gorkha
No, no, one
regiment of
second,
our country.
one
No,
second,
you don't
one
respect
second.
the Gorkha
We
regiment
Indians
of their
also,
country.
Kamraj, one second,
We
Kamraj.
recruit
We
them,
Indians were
right?
also fools to elect her Sonia Gandhi and gave her absolute power.
Sir,
Let
so
us accept
what?
that. No,
What
no, no,
has
sir,
that
we
got
were
to do
fools.
with Nepal?
No, I am also telling that when you are trying to make condescending remarks on Nepalese, accept the fault
What
of us.
condescending remarks have I made
No,
on
no, no, sir.
Nepalis?
This is the way I'm telling Gamraj.
No,
I'm
no,
telling
sir. I will
you.
not agree with you.
No,
I'm
no.
sorry, sir. I am
You can have your views.
extremely,
Even I am having my views.
I am extremely
No, no.
sorry,
Even
sir.
I am having my
I
views.
am
But
sorry, sir.
I am also
Sir.
very much sorry with your remarks.
You are
No,
older
no.
and
I am
wiser
also
than
very
I
much
am,
sorry with your remarks,
sir. You are
Gamraj.
older
I
and
am
wiser than I
clearly saying
am,
that
but I will not
Indians
allow
were
you to
also
police
fools to
me.
elect
I
Sonia
am sorry,
Gandhi.
sir. I
She
am
got
sorry.
absolute power with
Guys,
145 seats. One second.
What has
She
this
got
got to do with
145 seats. She
Nepal?
got absolute power in
Sir, what has
2004.
this got to
One
do with
second. In
Nepal?
2009, she got absolute power with
Sir,
209 seats. This
sir,
is the
what has this
foolishness
got to
of the
do?
Indian, the same
Sir,
Indian electorate.
I'm
No, no.
sorry, but what has this
You
got to
cannot,
do with Nepal?
you cannot just
I can, sir, and
crucify
I just
people like that.
did. Sir, I
You have
can,
to
and I
accept
just
your faults
did.
also.
No, I will not.
No, no, no,
There is no
don't
fault
accept. It's
here.
your wish. It's your
There is
wish.
no fault here,
No,
sir.
no,
I'm
you
sorry,
cannot. That,
sir.
no, no, you can accept your.
Sir.
You
Very
cannot.
respectfully,
I am also doing saying you very respectfully.
sir. Very respectfully, you are older and wiser than I am. I don't mince word with regard to
Even I don't
my
do that.
stand on
I,
Nepal. No, sir,
wherever I am at
please
fault,
hold
I
on,
will
sir.
accept it. And wherever
Sir,
and
please
when
hold on, sir.
one
Sir,
second,
please hold
Kamraj,
on.
one second.
Sir,
Even I am
no,
also
sir,
don't.
you said 1 second and
I am also very
sir,
much straightforward. But no, no,
Umesh,
no.
sir,
One second, Kamraj. One second, Kamraj.
Umesh, sir,
I
please
have been
listen to me,
following
sir. I'm
Nepal. I
sorry.
have been following Nepal.
Umesh,
One second,
sir, I will
Kamraj.
not allow you to police me,
Kamraj, one
sir.
second.
I will
I
not
have
allow
had
you to police my
interactions
words,
with the
sir.
Nepalese people.
Gamraj
I
bhai.
I
have
am
had an
just
sorry,
about,
I
oh
do not
God.
support all these things.
Sir, you don't
Maybe yes,
support. No, sir, why do you have to support
country,
it? I'm not asking you to
Gamraj
this
support.
bhai, sun
country
to lo yaar.
has given you large pool of military men to fight for your to
So,
defend the sovereignty and integrity of India.
Umesh sir,
This is how
cannot
you get emotionally blackmailed by other
Umesh
countries.
No,
sir,
no, no. I
This is
don't
Umesh
get
sir,
the
emotionally
this is
Umesh
the
backward.
sir,
thing.
I am
Sir,
acknowledging that
I am
I'm
Nepal,
really
sir,
saying
sir,
you.
please,
I
sir, I'm sorry.
acknowledge that
I'm sorry.
trailer.
I am extremely sorry, sir, that
I
you
am
get
also
offended.
extremely sorry, sir.
Sir,
This
I'm
is not the
sorry.
way
Sir, you're
you
not
should
letting
say
me
about
speak, sir. Sir, please
categorical
be
remarks
civilized
against
about
me.
this
No,
debate,
no,
sir.
no, no, no.
Please, sir. Please. What? No, no,
No,
no.
no. I am also
Sir,
saying that you don't make
please,
such
sir,
remarks
please,
against
sir.
Nepalese. No,
I am
they are
trying to,
they are not they
sir,
are
you're
misguided
heckling me
right
now,
now. The
sir.
same way
Sir,
the
you're
Indians were
heckling me,
misguided
sir.
in
Please listen to
2004.
what I'm saying, sir.
That's what I'm telling you.
Sir,
The
please,
the state of Nepal is
sir, stop heckling,
Kamraj.
sir.
Kamraj. The
Sir,
state of
please,
one
sir.
second,
Sir,
Kamraj,
one second.
please.
Listen
Umesh,
to me once,
Kamraj,
then I'll
Umesh,
keep quiet.
hello.
chill yaar.
Sorry,
One second.
somebody, नहीं, sorry, but moderators, please, नीचे बैठे वालों को कुछ समझ नहीं आता जब ये शुरू हो जाता है तो नीचे
अच्छा
नीचे
ठीक है एक
बैठने
ही
वालों
चीज
की
है
दिमाग
मैं
बैठ
एक ही
जाता है
रिमार्क
एंड
करके
सर जस्ट एक
Umesh,
सर
I will
sir.
एक सर
exit
एक
the
मिनट
room.
उमेश
One
सर
second,
एक सेकंड एक सेकंड
I'll
सर
make
कुछ
10
बोल
seconds.
के
Give me
नीचे
10
जा रही हूँ
seconds.
सर ओ माय
Devil,
गॉड
please. I don't know the real name. I am sorry to call you a devil, but one second. I can say only thing that Nepal is in the phase of transitionary phase. It is the same phase where which the Indians were there in 2004 when we elected what Italian with 145
It is
seats
not the
to rule.
same.
No, no, no. One
It is
second. You
not.
don't agree.
For
Don't interrupt, Kamraj. One second. I'm
Sir,
making my point.
I'm
No, no.
sorry,
One second.
sir.
One
Sir,
second.
you
No,
have,
no.
sir, I'm
We
muting you
elected
right now.
Sonia
I'm
Gandhi
muting
as
you, sir. Sir, listen to me. You have been interrupting me and you keep on saying that don't interrupt me. Okay? So I will not, I will not allow you to be, sir, I will not allow you to police my views on this. See, I'm sorry I didn't move him out. I muted him after his constant heckling. I muted him and he's left on his own. I did not kick him out.
Yaar,
Bhai, can I ask
welcome
you a
again.
question?
Okay.
Can we?
I was enjoying this. I was enjoying.
What the hell?
Anaji, are you
बस
cheap,
चुप कर
dude?
जी मत
Can
बोल
we?
चुप.
No, please, no, hold on, sirs, kind sirs,
Please
please.
hold on, sir.
Can we please, can we please talk pragmatically over strategic affairs of our country and not prioritize others?
Definitely.
Can we please do that?
Bambo, this is what I told you, right? This has
अरे
always
भैया
been our
रैंडम बंदा
problem.
ऑफेंड हो गया ओ ये क्यों बोल दिया ये क्यों बोल दिया गजब है यार हाउ डेयर यू से दिस हाउ डेयर यू से दैट अबे
Exactly.
Chill, relax, man.
Yeah, Nepal is a great
Forget
country.
about Nepal. Let's go back to
This is a
Indo
great.
Arey
It is
bhai,
really great
Indians are more
conversation that
offended
we are
about
having.
Nepal than Nepalis are. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Nepalis listen, Nepalis listen to the truth and they're like, इसको पता चल गया कि मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, हाँ? Better be quiet. I should not speak on
अरे
this matter.
कमरा
And Indians are like, how dare you speak on this? How dare you speak that?
अरे
Like,
few
this is
people अरे
amazing, amazing
कमरा
thing.
Mojo,
One thing.
relax, relax.
Don't you respect Gorkha regiment?
Yeah, definitely we
I do,
respect.
sir. I do, sir.
Definitely we, but
But when you call Gorkha regiment as a part of Nepal, I take strict offense to that.
what
I'm
We
sorry.
have
yeah
Gorkhas here in
तो आप
Darjeeling.
ऐसे
They are
बोलो
not
ना कि
there
Nepalese.
is a
Sorry.
there
Anyway,
there is a Gorkha
Wait.
जब आप
regiment
ऐसे
in
बोल
Uttarakhand
do
British
you
है.
Army
know
also.
Arey, now this
British Army also.
conversation
नहीं
is
पता
about
इंडियन
Nepal.
आर्मी
It
में
was
no,
कितने
about
okay,
रहते हैं
okay,
ITF,
okay,
यार.
guys,
इंडियन आर्मी
listen.
कितने रहते
Let's not go to Nepal. मैं ऐसे काम करते हैं कल भी एक रूम रखेंगे. I'll put it from SR members on global updates. वहाँ we can talk about any random country starting from Greater Nepal to Greater Sri Lanka. Okay? अभी रुक जाओ.
भाई
पहले
एक दो
ITF खत्म
भाई
कर लो.
एक दो पुलिस वाले बंदे भी रखना यार पैनल पे यार, ठीक
सही
है.
में
अरे भाई देख भाई मैं और आयुष आना चाहते थे बैक चैनल में बोल भी
नहीं
रहे थे क्या करें
नहीं
पर हमें
आनंद जी,
बहुत मजा आ रहा था यार.
I tried to stop him, bhai, कि stop heckling me, sir, and then I finally muted him. I think he left on his
Okay,
own.
Kamraj, one question to you.
yeah.
Yes,
So,
please.
how do you see the, since their PM directly landed in the BJP office recently? So, how do you see things? Are they going to get changed? How do you see the
मैंने
भाई
I had answered this यार
मुकुल
already
जी,
but गम्मू
I'm
तो
just
बोल.
trying to
There
मुकुल
is
जी,
understand what
I
your
will
take is.
I will not speak on this matter further, but पैसा चाहिए, पैसे की भूख है अभी,
बस
यही है बस
हाँ
और कुछ नहीं.
एग्जैक्टली
Exactly.
भाई सीधी बात
मे-
है. तो वही चीज
मुझे
है
तो
ना.
लगा बीजेपी
हाँ
बीजेपी इलेक्शन लड़ेगी नेपाल में.
लड़े अच्छी बात है भाई
भाई
क्या
लड़े और
दिक्कत है.
क्या.
मैं तो चाहूंगा मुकुल लड़े मेरी मेरी बला से. मैं अब आगे बढ़ते हैं ना. हर्ष जी वेलकम. डू यू हैव एनीथिंग टू स्पीक ऑन द टॉपिक एंड नॉट ऑन नेपाल प्लीज.
Anand, okay.
हाँ
Before
सॉरी
Harsh
सॉरी
goes,
आयुष जी गो.
yeah. No, no, Anand, before Harsh goes, since we have kind of deviated from the topic, let me just ask a question to you, Anand, and I believe you're the right person to answer this. The so-called India's interest of not turning Quad into a strategic alliance, does India have a certain strings attached that they do not want it to internationalize the issue of LAC and they do not want it to turn China into a big picture evil?
Did not want to turn China into a what? Sorry,
Into a big
ending थोड़ा
picture
करें.
evil means a country who has
Oh
been
God,
pressurizing India.
I heard something else
Even I
altogether.
did. Sorry.
No, no.
No,
Yeah,
look.
no, Ayush, go ahead, Ayush. Yeah.
आयुष ने तो पूछ लिया जवाब मेरे को देना था. मैं very simple and short terms I would like to say this that the whole nonsense of our approach starts under the Nehruvian region when we offered our seat to them. After that we have been just trying to lick our wounds.
Someone
And
just
this
wrote
is
in the
where
comment section.
Nepal also interestingly comes, and then now we have shifted to the area close to them. So anyway, our problem is that we have always been very not timid, I would say, but very restrictive in order to raise certain issues on a global forum. We have only focused on Pakistan and terrorism until quite recently that in 2019 I think the current administration in India decided it is time we target China. Because see, the problem, or rather the boon for us here is that the Pakistanis were under the Chinese pocket, which has now changed. And China now posed a different sort of a threat. So to internationalize the LAC, it actually did start from there slightly, and then the Chinese did the wonderful job of thinking that they can try and beat our soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. There, ergo also violating a border treaty that we had with them, that whatever meetings at a brigadier or a major general level that we'll have, it will be without arms. They brought in arms, right? And we ultimately decided to give them a taste of their own medicine. 100 of those guys got killed, and they will deny whatever they want to, but they did die. And we were controlling the Kailash ranges. We gave that up for some reason, but we were controlling it. So it is now internationalized to a large extent. So, and we are doing it openly now. Earlier जो हमारा stance था कि भाई पहले नहीं करते थे चाइना के साथ, because the same problem, right? The Indian foreign policy still has this thing. We both are former colonies. Perhaps there could be ways where we could come closer together. And I'm absolutely glad that because of the Russian-Ukraine crisis, the Indians have not showed that step into that direction. They have furthermore added to the problem basket that look, you have constantly ignored our problems with the Chinese on the LAC. Why should we give a damn if a few Ukrainian Jewish refugees are dying at the hands of the fascist Vladimir Putin? We don't care. Focus on China, then talk to us. So internationalization is happening now. Earlier it wasn't, because they thought that we could have a good, decent relationship. Both India and China are rising powers this century of Asia, blah, 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 blah. They underestimated the Chinese. The world, although estimates or underestimates or overestimates the Chinese, they use the Chinese for their benefit. The Chinese use them for their benefit. On that note, we are actually at the losing end. But now, since we have done this, and during COVID, thanks to the outbreak in Wuhan, there have been certain alliances coming up against China, to which we have openly jumped in and become a part of it. So I think now that policy has changed. Anyway, Harshji, I hope that briefly answers your question. I'm sorry if I lagged a little bit.
No, sure, sure. It does. It does. Yes.
Harsh, go ahead.
Hey, Anhaji, I am still
Gabbo,
like
stop
under
saying
shock
G,
right now.
okay?
But listen, I am still under shock here. Like I didn't even spit the real venom that is within me
यार
on
देख
the said
भाई,
Let's
nation.
move on from that.
Like,
लेट्स मूव ऑन फ्रॉम दैट. हर्ष को बोलने दो. मैं बस एक पॉइंट तुम्हें याद दिलाना चाहता हूँ. रिमेंबर
भाई तो हमेशा
when
ध्यान
yeah.
Kalyan
दिलाते हैं.
Singh had died and we did a room on Kalyan Singh, he
Mm.
came and he objected again. So it's a
Oh,
habit. Let it be. छोड़.
yeah,
Harsh bhai,
yeah.
please go ahead.
I don't understand what we're doing with Quad as well as BRICS. So that is what is perplexing to me, because these groups are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum. So we have Australia, America, India, and Japan on one side, and then we have Russia, China, and South Africa, the few other countries, which are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum, and India is on both sides. So this is what doesn't make sense to me. Also, uh, Quad is more about the military alliance, and there's a very uh, interesting point that was made by uh, uh, someone called Abhijit Ayar Mitra. What he said that Japan and Australia and US have their military equipments which are compatible. What I mean by that is they can communicate with each other. It's like there is a wolf and their machine learning in that, and whenever a wolf that is a leader of the pack is attacking, the other wolves automatically understand what is happening and then they act accordingly. But Indian equipments are mostly from Russia, and these are not compatible. So whenever there's a situation where they need to cooperate, Indian equipments will not be able to work together with those equipments from Australia and US. So that is one point. Secondly, we are with BRICS also, and even though it is about economic alliance, but also at some points it is about military cooperation. But if you take a closer look at this, you know that China and India are completely uh, against each other, and then there is a Russia that is in middle. But whenever there's a fight between China and India, Russia will definitely take side with China. So that also doesn't make sense for India to be in part of BRICS. Also, when it comes to economic alliance, the top leaders are China and Russia. So they are only influencing all the decisions, all the economic uh, deals, and so I don't understand why India is part of both BRICS and Quad. Maybe somebody had some views on this.
You want to take this, Ayush?
First of all, I
हाँ
would
हाँ,
like to
please go
just
ahead.
say one. Yeah, first of all, I will just suggest you to go and listen the what our external minister, as Shankar has said, that Quad is not a military alliance; it is some kind of cooperative alliance. So he said literally in one of the uh, uh, you can say summit. I don't remember this year only in the month of March. That's
I think it was the Council of European
yes,
Affairs. But
yes.
anyway, I understand your problem with the Indian position, Harsh. It's a very complicated one. And that is why it is more fun. Because you see, there was a time when Switzerland was considered the neutral party. Nowadays, it is us, and we happily appropriate it. But anyway, going from the whole terminology, see, understand this. We are at a point in our history where we have not only suffered because of the Cold War, we have gained also because of the Cold War. So when the remnants of the Cold War take shape, which is the Russian Federation and the United States of America, in whatever possible way it is right now, and the Chinese also, I will mention them deliberately, we need to make sure that our policy is not diverted to a line of thought. Because they understand that we have this itch of not just being the oldest civilization with pride, thanks to Hinduism, no other religion comes into that place, but also for having an opinion without foreign interference. And if we do have a foreign interference or influence, it is on our terms. So whether it was the Soviets or the Americans or briefly the non-alignment, blah blah blah, we did that thinking that it is the best way possible, and we wanted to make sure it shows a guiding light to the rest of the nations. We are part of BRICS. We are part of SEO. We were part of SARC. SARC is redundant now, thanks to the Indian initiative of BIMSTEC. We are also part of Quad, QSD as it was known. We are part of IPEF. We are the leading member of the Solar Alliance. So being part of so many international organizations isn't really a problem. We are also part of the UN, and the UN is nowadays nothing but just a place for people to rant in their beautiful Oxford English. But the point is, how do you manage to get the best out of them? That is where the Indian policy makes sense, and that is where our position with BRICS and with Quad also makes sense. Why? Number one, our history of a relationship with the erstwhile Soviet Union and with the Russian Federation in continuance. It is by far, even a Google search, although I don't like Google, even a basic Google search will show that on most accounts, the Russians actually prefer trusting Indians over the Chinese. देखो फॉरेन पॉलिसी में या इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस में रियलिज्म को हमेशा देखो. Realism and real politics is the thing which talks. Everybody can talk about democracy or our version of democracy or freedom of expression and freedom of birthright and freedom of pooping around here and there. But the point is, it's the realism that actually drives it. And that too, a small amount of it, you cannot go overdrive, right? Then you come to the Chinese problem if you do it. So our realism is with the contrasting situation in South Asia, and also given the fact that our historical and cultural leanings extend not just in the Arab world, but also in East Asia, we need to make tough choices. So our tough choice is simple, where we see that it is benefiting us to counter the Chinese, because let's be very clear, the Modi government in 2.0 has recognized China as the problem, not the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis are nothing yet. It is recognized the Chinese. So if the Chinese are recognized, it makes sense for us to join multiple alliances where we can counter the Chinese. And we have done that, by the way. But when it comes to BRICS, or when it comes to maintenance with alliances of Russia, we have joined those alliances also where yes, the Chinese are a partner, but they are not the dominating partner. You will never see us in a group where there is China but no Russia. It has always been China, Russia, and then India, because we know that the Russians help us outweigh the Chinese. The Chinese know it well. There is no good relationship between the Russians and the Chinese. वो तो अभी because of the situation in Ukraine, they are having a good relationship. Okay, they have a border issue at Mongolia. They have problems with the
all
eastern
through
Russian part. Ah, Gamaraj,
their
you're back, thankfully.
their
So, yeah,
entire border with Russia. They have a
is a
problem with
problem.
that.
It is a
Yeah.
problem. They've had on skirmishes, by the way. They've lost people there. They have issues of competition in Central Asia also, which is where the Russians look at us to help them counter the Chinese.
Not just that.
They एक सेकेंड जस्ट लेट मी फिनिश भाई, फिर जो भी है वो बोल लेना. आई देन आई वुड स्पीक फॉर लाइक 15 minutes. They have issues even in Middle East, right? So the point is, this motivates us to be there in those organizations where we know the Russians help us sway and also control and contain the Chinese. We are not part of CPEC. We are not part of the One Belt and Road Initiative. They are all driven by the Chinese, right? But we are part of BRICS, and we are part of SCO, because we understand the geopolitics of that region and the geoeconomics as mentioned by Ayush. So that is why we are balancing ourselves out, because see, India as a country benefits a lot from its existence and the kind of things we can offer, which is number one, market. Number two, a long-standing defense partner. Number three, a partner which also understands and appreciates the allies' concern. This is a very big bonus for most nations when they deal with us. This is not the case with the Chinese, certainly also not that much with the Russians, and the Americans तो never cared about their allies. Okay, मुनरो डॉक्ट्रिन लाके उन्होंने कहा कि हमारे आसपास तुम भटकोगे नहीं. So the point is, we are a pragmatic ally, although we have issues in our foreign policy which will come later, but we have evolved from it. Now, just small point on the tech issue, which you said that there are countries saying, oh, the Russian tech thing is not good and everything. देखो यार, ऐसा है कि हमारा 60% एंड मे बी इट विल डिक्लाइन फर्दर रशिया से आ रहा है बिकॉज ऑफ अ लॉन्ग स्टैंडिंग अंडरस्टैंडिंग. टेक जो हमारा रशिया से आ रहा है या टेक हमारा जो अमेरिका से आ रहा है, इसमें फंडामेंटल डिफरेंस आपको ये समझना पड़ेगा कि जिस रीजन में हम लोग प्लेस्ड हैं, कौन सा टेक वहां इफेक्टिव है. If the Russian tech works extremely well in such regions, why wouldn't we buy Russian tech? S400 is an excellent thing. We are placing the S400 against the Pakistanis. The Russians have no objection of us placing S400 or using Russian jets against the Chinese. In fact, you know this, it's an interesting tidbit and a fact that I'm giving you. The Galwan crisis actually speeded up the process of us buying S400 from Russia, and they did not even object despite having close ties with China. Whereas the Americans never share the technological information with us. They put on conditions to use which tech at which nation, and they'll do it with China because China is the biggest trading partner. So why the hell should we buy things from America, right? Number one. Number two, the Ukraine war is happening. Anybody over here sitting in this room, whether you support Ukraine or Russia, can very well see that the Russians are winning this war. So much so they have landlocked that nation. Now, if their tech was so useless, they wouldn't do it. You can say for a matter of fact that yes, the Ukrainians have better tech, but they don't have people to use it. But you cannot dismiss the fact that the Russian tech is actually very good, and it is one of the best, and it is just a start. So fine, we will decrease certain amount of dependency given to national security and energy security, even technological security, but that does not mean we'll overnight shift to the American side, no matter how many billions they are ready to offer to us, because we need to look at our national interest first. So understand that both in the case of different organizations from different blocks, as you look at it, or with technological interdependence, it is our national interest which is first, rather than the interest of the two nations leading those two sides. Gamaraj, you can take over.
Yeah, yeah. Just want
Yeah.
to add into that answer as well. The Chinese and the Russians have had a very fraught relationship with each other. There are legacy issues even with regard to the Soviet Union. I can't remember the name of the book for the life of me, but obviously this is unconfirmed, information. But there is, there are books out there that will tell you that how the Chinese were actively involved in undermining the Soviet Union and actually supporting the Americans during the Cold War on many
Yeah,
occasions, on more than
yeah.
one occasion.
What
And
I
yeah,
hmm.
I'll just take some 20 seconds or so. Theoretically also, not only there are legacy issues, apart from the current information with the war and everything, there are border issues like Anand did talk about. But apart from this, the Chinese have their own expansionist model. It is mostly, this is territorial expansionism aside. It is, the global dominance is something that is currently, like, what is in vogue in China is something called the humane authority model, which was pioneered by Dr. Yan Shuetong, and that has been pushed, like, नाम लेके नहीं बोलते, but actually यही हो रहा है background में. And at the same time, the Russians have their own plans with expansion into Europe particularly, and preferably even down south, if like certain other central Asian countries can come into their control. Again, they would have no problems with it at all. Like, and it wouldn't have to be like territorial control. It can be like economic alliance, whatever. So they have like the Duginist model, right, which is based on Dr. Alexander Dugin's writings, and this you can find. It's a very old plan that they are, going beat by beat on this. You can find more about this information on Russia's plans of global dominance, or at least maximization of their power in this book called The Future of Geopolitics by Dr. Alexander Dugin. Another one of his interesting books is The Fourth Political Theory. Very, very nice and theoretical book if anybody of you is into theoretical political science. Uh, and with regard to China, you can find their expansionist models are also based on their ancient thought. So that you can find in this book called Ancient Chinese Thought, Modern Chinese Power. That is written by Dr. Yan Shutung. These are important people. These are not some random scholars that have just written and floated ideas and they've been ignored and it doesn't matter. It's a nice. No, these are authors that are taken very, very seriously by both the states. In fact, without the support of the Chinese state, Dr. Yan Shutung wouldn't have such a huge voice in the
Hmm.
international relations community.
Yeah. Our relationships with Russia have always been at their peak. There isn't any single instance when India and Russia saw some compromise in their bilateral relationships. But yes, one thing that I would admire about Russia is their ability to build up relationships in a very constructive manner. We have seen that how the ISIS siege of Iraq and Syria led to the Middle East seeking assistance from Russia, and how the Russian Air Force was instrumental in helping Syria come out of the crisis that was a creation that was an indirect result of USS purposeful interference in the internal affairs of some countries in the Middle East. How Saddam Hussein's how Saddam Hussein's unfair overthrowing, or uh, how the unfair takeover of Iraq led to the creation of ISIS, and how United States uses destructive approach in building relationships. They lure out the people, they lure out the people in that country through their popular media. You fund the militant and rebel groups of of their countries to create chaos, and make these militant and Naxalite groups more active to help United States achieve their authoritative goals in a very smooth way. It's not, and Iraq and Syria are not just two nations victim to this. Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Kosovo, many more countries to add in this list are a witness of how United States establishes relationships by dividing the countries, how they create an internal divide within the minds of people by creating a polarizing support to a specific political group uh, that addresses the agendas of the United States and supports their invasive nature, that appeals to their invasive nature. But Russia isn't the same. We have seen how had proved that it could, how Russia had proved how Russia had proved that it could unconditionally help out the Middle East countries who were dealing with the terrorism like crisis that had shaken up the world and had created a worry among the developed countries. Now Russian Air Force and their help and the amount of assistance, both in terms of military and economic assistance, they had provided to Syria and Iraq, had impressed them so much that even during the Russia versus Ukraine war, we have seen how Syrians were openly expressing their desire to help out the Russian military in their campaign of conquering, not conquering, I would say, in liberating, in how they were expressing that desire of helping out the Russian army in uh, their approach for liberating the Russians that was stuck in the Ukrainians, or you can see the Russian speaking minority in the Ukraine. And often we have seen that there was a point of time when even Russia, when it was a part of the Soviet Union, was planning to attack China. But at that point of time, China was militarily a very weak country and was also dealing with a lot hunger crisis. And China and they even today Russia and China have some territorial disputes. And if you see, territorial disputes are a are is characteristic to Chinese foreign policy. They say something, they do something, and then they plan for something else. We cannot predict their nature. The Chinese are taking decisions in such a way that it would always suit to their needs and demands, no matter if it requires supporting the West or if it requires supporting Russians. Now, but we for some reason have come to know that Chinese can never be a reliable partner to Indians and not even to the Russians. But Russians are very clever in this move. They know that they don't have to exaggerate their conflicts with the Russians,
Uh,
but at the same time they want to get their needs satisfied from China. And we
exactly.
are seeing how the Chinese are actually proposing to compensate for the for the vacuum in the vacuum in the demands that is being created when Russia is cutting off the when Russia is cutting off the oil and energy supplies to the European countries. Now it needs some other consumers
Kindly make it
through which it
fast.
can actually get revenues. Now China is extending its hands to express an economic agreement with Russia, but Russia is very well aware about. I'm damn sure that Russia is very well aware about Chinese dominating nature and their expansionist agendas that could be very much brutal in future. And yes, they are very much tolerant towards Indians, because
Yeah,
we
I
have
would
seen that
disagree with that,
Russia doesn't
Vladimir.
have a
भाई
colonial
भाई
like
भाई
mindset.
भाई भाई हो गया भाई हो गया
Yeah, I mean, there's beyond laboring a point. So one point I would point out that Vladimir should not have labored at is that Russia is somehow being philanthropist when it comes
No,
to India.
I won't label it
Yeah.
philanthropist, but we cannot
No,
call
hang
them
on. So let me complete my point. No.
guys.
Yeah. Let me complete my
Stick to
point.
the topic, I guess it would
Yeah.
be good for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I'll just counter that point quickly. Is that no country is being philanthropist when it comes to any other country. Everyone is acting in self-interest. China is acting in no greater self-interest than Russia. India is not acting in any lesser self-interest than China. Right? We're all at par, and we should be at par. That's how the world works. Right? The moment you start doing things out of friendship, out of goodness of heart, the whole idea of geopolitics goes for a toss.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I would just why I came up and why I raised my hand is just to give my 2 cents about 2 points that were raised earlier. Number one, somebody was comparing BRICS and Quad and saying that there's some kind of a conflict of interest between BRICS and Quad. So other people, including Anandji, I think they raised very valid points how they are not. In my view, BRICS is a very novel invention. It has no strategic depth per se. Okay, BRICS is just yet another uh, what do they call it? Multilateral economic institution, financial institution, and there are so many of them. And each of them comes with their own costs, right? So World Bank, we know, World Bank loan comes at a cost to policy. You should just look at the way Sardar Sarovar Dam project, the funding for Sardar Sarovar Dam was pulled due to Mera Patkar. That is because World Banks, there are some parts of World Bank, some departments of World Bank which are extremely left dominated. There is no reason to expect that BRICS will be completely under India or under the control of India. Even then, is are we clear what is our role in BRICS? Are we uh, the contributors to BRICS, or are we the beneficiaries of BRICS?
Because if we are contributors, we are getting, you know, AAA returns, like 1%, 0.5% kind of returns on the money that we put into the BRICS Bank. If we are beneficiaries, then we are at the hands of whoever the donor is, right? So BRICS Bank is somewhat of an experiment. I think we should treat it as an experiment. It's not much of a thing. I think earlier in the room it was pointed out that BRICS, the idea of BRICS itself was a financial index made by an index, a basket made by one of the major investment banks. I think Morgan Stanley was pointed out. I may be wrong, right? Whereas quad is something that we have put our eggs in. It's a basket that we have put our eggs in, and quad is a strategic alliance. Is a strategic defense alliance. It is when I think we should try to make quad the NATO of the East. That should be the idea of quad. So quad is completely. I mean, let BRICS go for a toss. Quad and other alliances in the East by Modi's look East policy. That's where we should be concentrating, right? The second point I wanted to talk about was somebody talking about how Abhijit Iyer Mitra pointed out that most of our defense platforms are compatible with only Russian platforms. Well, yes, that's if you're in the software or tech industry, that is vendor lock-in, right? So the moment you purchase, all your employees are using Microsoft Outlook, the moment they're using Excel, PowerPoint, whatever have you, there you have vendor lock-in, and there you go for the network effect that you have to. Then the next software you have to get would have to be a Microsoft database or a Microsoft, uh, you know, um, source control, whatever it is. So that does not mean that you stay with Microsoft. At some point, you have to wean yourself off of it. At some point, you have to wean yourself off of that platform, and you have to say, okay, Russia, thank you. It was a great platform. We loved it. Now we want to have drones which are not compatible with the platform. Now we want to have our indigenous LCA aircraft and LCH helicopters which are not compatible with the platform. Thank you, we loved you, we had a good time, but now we have to move on, right? So vendor lock-in is not something that an enterprise should take to heart. And in fact, let me tell you also that most CIOs and CTOs, uh, they make their stock options from actually having such major transition projects. So, our government could have some major uh, benefits from moving on from a certain platform. And as of now, I think we're moving towards an Atmanirbhar platform, right? So that's a great thing. So my 2 points are finished. I would just like to finish with some references, and I love the fact that the pinned link is to a reference, and I'll certainly read it. My own references when it comes to China, there are two books I would like to suggest. The first book is named China: A History by a person, a historian named John Key, Keay. China: A History. If you want to understand China as a civilizational nation, this is the book. The current geopolitics of China, there is On China written by Henry Kissinger. For geopolitics, my book of reference is Coup d'etat by A Practical Handbook by Edward Luttwak. And for understanding India as a civilization history, as a civilization nation, it is the book named Evolution of Indian Polity by E. Shamasastri. Thank you, mods. Great room. I loved listening, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much, Shai. I'm seeing Arun Bhai is here. So yeah, Arun जी अगर आपको कुछ कहने हैं तो आप बोल सकते हैं अरुण जी. अब बहुत देर से स्पीकर्स पैनल में. You around, sir?
हाँ मैं हूँ तो पर बहुत ज्यादा कुछ बोलने के लिए नहीं है. किसी का सवाल था कि क्वेड और ब्रिक्स मतलब एक तरीके से क्यों मतलब क्यों है ये दोनों. तो मुझे लगता है कि दोनों का मोटो अलग अलग है, दोनों का एम अलग अलग है, कंट्रीज अलग अलग है. बेसिक इंडिया कॉमन है तो बहुत अलग है दोनों. ब्रिक्स जो है पूरा इकोनॉमिकली है और ये मतलब डिफेंस से लेकर के हर तरीके से है. और ये पर्टिकुलर इसी रीजन से बनाया गया, साउथ एशिया रीजन के लिए. इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि दोनों में बहुत डिफरेंस है और दोनों का एम अलग अलग है. बस इतना ही कहूंगा मैं अभी के लिए. थैंक यू.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And yeah, Anand, Piyush, guys, you're around, or should we wind up the room by now?
I think we can do final comments, right? In fact, Mukul and Devil have not even made a statement. I want them to speak. Mukul, Devil,
I cannot speak as to now. I'm right now in between something, so please let Devil speak.
Devil.
No, I'm only here to maintain peace and decorum. When two people fight and I sit in the audience, it pisses me off big time. So I only sit here that if two people start talking over each other, I'm going to either stop them or not let at least
So,
one of them speak
so
so
Devil
the
is
other
again.
person can
That's fair.
complete.
That's fair.
So Gamraj Bhaiya,
It was very
Devil is
nice
with us, I
closing
guess.
comment, Devil.
She's against Nepali supremacy.
भाई मैं तो कहता हूँ कि इनको पुलिस नियुक्त किया जाए अगले कमरे के लिए, मैं कह रहा हूँ.
देखो एक चीज बोलूंगा इस बात पे गमराज, जो डेविल ने बात बोली है, तुम पे कॉल आउट रूम बन जाएगा थोड़ी देर में. तुम वापस से यूल बी द कम्युनिस्ट.
अरे
बूचू.
यार,
there any
एनी
Sanghi
टाइम.
communists on Clubhouse?
नहीं, बट आउट ऑफ
मैंने
टॉपिक जाके थोड़ा सा बोल रही हूँ कि डू डोंट इंगेज. नीचे अगर कोई है और नाराज हो रहा है तो हो जाओ, आई डोंट केयर. डू नॉट इंगेज NRIs when they are talking about the neighbors of India, because वो सिर्फ और सिर्फ फेस मेंटेन करने आते हैं यहाँ पे. दे द ओनली जियोपॉलिटिकल थिंग दे नो अबाउट the current state of India as India geographically located in Asia is that हमें सबसे अच्छा अच्छा बना के रखना है ताकि सब हमसे अच्छा अच्छा बन के रहें. They don't have any knowledge and I have a
अब
sample
आपके
set of
ऊपर
5,000 NRIs. अरे
अब
लगाओ यार,
आप
4 लगा दो. I
आपके
don't
ऊपर
care,
कॉल
I
आउट
am
रूम
not
लग जाए.
scared. लगा
अरे
दो,
भाई
लगा
पर
दो.
वो मुझे समस्या नहीं थी एंगेज करने में भाई, पर वो यार सांस तो ले लेते यार, बीच में
नहीं ओनली.
सांस तो ले
तो
लेते
भाई
भाई,
राय
सांस
साहबी
भी नहीं
कहाँ.
ले रहे थे.
भाई राय साहबी डिस्कस करी थी ना हमने एक दिन. We had a separate room on the Rai Sahabi of NRIs की भाई, मतलब वही उत्तम वही स्वच्छ वही वही उत्तम
नहीं,
वही
मैं तो
स्वच्छंद, बाकी
सारे
तो
एनआरएस के बारे में मैं कभी कुछ नहीं बोलूंगा, एंड आई थिंक.
जनरलाइज नहीं कर रही, बट
हाँ
यहाँ
हाँ
पे आके जो
हाँ.
ज्ञान दे.
नहीं,
यार भाई भाई
वो
प्लीज
अलग ही चीज है,
यार.
वो अलग
तो
चीज
इसलिए
हो
आई
जाएगी
कीप
भाई,
आई कीप
मत
क्वाइट. मैं थोड़ा
कीजिए.
ज्यादा रेडिकल हूँ.
नहीं नहीं ठीक है, those points are necessary but for a different room. इस सेंस में मैं कह
कहीं
रहा था. आई
कहीं
थिंक
अनहद न फंस जाए.
नहीं नहीं मैं I don't care about myself यार. I am तो more open against these
हाँ.
guys, you know that, but it's just कि पता है the whole topic and title then goes
But
for a toss ना ये.
what she's
राइट
saying is
राइट.
100% correct, though. I don't think anybody should be objecting. The point she made was 100%
नहीं,
accurate.
that's what I said,
Uh,
they're absolutely
no, no, you
useful.
didn't. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you
अरे
why.
भाई मैंने
Uh,
वही तो कहा, she is right
uh,
but it is not the right time in this room. That's what I said.
no, you said sare NRIs ऐसे नहीं होते हैं. Like
यार
you said
मैंने
something
नहीं,
like
वो
that.
गमराज
But
बोला
No,
है
that I said that,
भाई.
I said
मतलब
that.
यार.
okay, okay. So to Gamraj, actually, I should be directing, but what she's saying is 100% right. People who don't have the experience of growing up in India, who don't haven't lived there, shouldn't be lecturing to Indians about how to conduct themselves. Okay, and how Indians um, Indians should be, what Indians should do. Uh, ABCDs, NRIs, etc. should not be advising that to people living in India. So that what she's saying is 100% correct. I endorse it. I think everybody should actually uh, listen to what devil is saying, and believe me, like I've grown up in the West, but I would never um I really get annoyed when I see these ABCDs, people who grew up in foreign countries. They think they know everything, and they think they're very intellectual, and they are coming here and lecturing to Indians on what India's foreign policy should be, what India's relations with its neighbor should be. That's what I have to say.
Karanji, the problem happens that, see, I'll explain my position over here is that there are many people who shift to, other countries in this lifetime, right? So it's not just the fact that people who are born there are, although that what you're pointing out is quite correct. Like that is certainly an attitude that I've also experienced from a lot of people. But the point is that, people think that they are going unheard, or on many occasions I've heard that, people there are jealous of our successes and whatnot. So I'm not saying everybody
No,
is
no,
like
it's
this,
not.
okay?
Nobody's
No,
jealous.
Karanji,
Nobody's
Karan.
jealous.
Karanji,
It's
Karanji,
it's
let
a
me clarify.
superiority
Yeah.
complex. It's a superiority complex
Uh,
on some on their
maybe
part.
so, maybe so, Karanji. Look. Let me clarify my position. Okay, it is, it is. It can be okay at an individual capacity, at an individual level. Anybody may have any kind of an opinion, right? And you're quite correct in pointing that out, sir. I don't disagree with you. I mean, I'm. If there's anybody on this platform, I'm the one who's 100% with you on this. Okay, but the issue is that it's if you just sort of say that okay, everybody is like so, it does marginalize those people who kind of understand what is going on, such as yourself, for example, right? So I don't want to be in that position where I say that everybody is like so and so, right? So this is what happens, and not everybody who is engaging are those people who are born there. I mean, there are people who are nationalized citizens in the US or in the UK, so don't want to do that. So it's a
See,
bit of a slippery slope.
I've had I've had conversations with most of the people in question. I know them better than anybody else on the panel. When this question was posed, would you fight for Bharat if Bharat went to war? And most of them, they said no. They would fight for their naturalized country, but they won't fight for Bharat. So when somebody's loyalty lies elsewhere, their whole worldview, their conception of the world, their dietary patterns, the way they conduct themselves in the bathroom, and so on. It's they they've grown up in a completely different system of indoctrination, and yet they still deem it fit to lecture Indians on what our foreign policy should be, how we should handle caste matters, what our thought process towards caste should be, etc. It's just quite it's quite laughable, to be honest. Nobody should be taking those comments seriously, and
Hmm.
honestly, it should be called out from time to time. Just because somebody has a
Right,
superiority
sir.
complex because they are earning in
Hmm.
US dollars and you are earning in rupees, so they think they can advise to you on your culture and how to conduct your lifestyle. It should be called out. It shouldn't be just people listening and just for the sake of being merry and everybody being happy and on good terms. Nobody is objecting to it. I don't think that's right. What Devil said, I think she 100% what she said, she was coming from a accurate place.
Indeed, sir. And be that as it may, I think we should return back to the topic of the room because we are going on a different trajectory altogether. And this is actually a can of worms on Clubhouse. Trust me on this. Like, 100 times these conversations have happened and there is actually no end to it. Even though I agree with most of the things that they're saying, but there's no point in furthering this
No,
discussion, at
he's
least in this room.
absolutely right, but
In this room.
we should go
Yeah.
back to the title. He's right in his
Yes.
observation. I,
Yes.
in fact, share the
Yes.
same. Anyway, so final comments, right? Because I don't think anybody else has to add anything to this. So, final comments. Should we do it from PTR or the popcorn's standard format should work? Piyush, any comments? Like, do you? Ayush, bhai,
No, no,
go ahead.
no. What I'm saying is let's do a PTR, Anat. You can
Okay,
start
done,
with you or
done,
with
done.
Piyush.
Before we do the final comment bit, I'm just asking one person who's down below to come up if he wishes to add. If he doesn't, he will not come up. Okay. Anyway, Piyush, please, any final comments on what we have discussed today?
uh, no comment, but I would like to put one point. When someone was putting their point that it is Indian weapons, means Russian weapons are not compatible with other weapons, they are with the American weapons or something. So let me remind them that India is developing their own avionics and all, so it will be able to compatible with other weapons. And that's it. And thank you for enlightening us, Anand Bhaiya, Ayush Bhaiya, Gamraj Bhaiya.
You can't thank me for this, okay? We are all part of this. Gammu, anything to.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, sticking to the topic, just the fact that my personal observation is that I am not as the way things stand with regard to IPEF. I'm not very hopeful on that. Maybe there can be certain changes, and suddenly it might become conducive to our, our interests as well. But as things stand right now, there's a lot of indecision within the forum itself. So that is certainly going to affect how IPEF moves forward. Interesting approach, at least. uh, Even the act of this nature is like sometimes appreciable, the way things are going on right now. But having said that, I would also like to finish with saying that India has better moral authority than Nepal, and we will win every time. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You are a
okay.
Nepali Gamraj
Ayush
bhai.
bhai, anything to add? Ayush bhai.
Ayush bhaiya?
Yeah, sorry for that. I believe there was a glitch. Look, to be very frank, summing it up, we almost had a 90 to 100 hours of discussion here. And one of the recapitulation that I want to give to everyone is pragmatism is a key for India when India deals with the United States of America led innovation. I repeat, pragmatism is the key, right? I believe what India has done is Quad is pragmatism at its peak, that India do not allow to turn Quad into a strategic organization, and thus via that India has benefited in terms of the geoeconomics. Though I believe Indo-Pacific Economic Framework is coming on the hotspot and is coming on the bed of Indo-Pacific, where many development has already been carried away. But what India need to do is India need to actually vitalize the importance of Indo-Pacific Economic Framework via the partners, via the newly added 12 other partners that is there with India, accepting the other members of the Quad. That India need to do, and thus via that India need to set up the economical targets in the coming time in the Indo-Pacific. For the next 5 to 10 years, what India can do is India can absorb the opportunities of the geoeconomics in Indo-Pacific, because Indo-Pacific is something which is a lot to offer and something which has been unexplored. But I believe it would turn out to be an invasion ground for a lot many countries. European countries are already coming in. You have United States of America presence into it, but India's centrality is something which is geographically boosted, which is naturally boosted, because India is a natural ally of Indo-Pacific, because India is situated into the center of Indo-Pacific. So that is something which India need to do. Along with that, a balance is a key for India, as I say. And third, pragmatism, I repeat, is again a key for India in terms of dealing with USA. That is something which I would recapitulate my points with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayush bhai. Mukul, if you want to speak anything on any final comment. If not, I'll go ahead. I guess not. अच्छा हाँ.
Anand bhai, I'm
अच्छा
working.
ठीक है. Sorry, my
I was.
bad. राजा भैया, कुछ anything you wish to add? Final comments?
I'm surprised, Gamraj, you have amazing knowledge about Nepal. My company was dealing with Nepal. We do export a lot of stuff to Nepal since 60s. And you're absolutely right. Nepal was not the same since last 20 years. It's changed a lot. And I love the comments and the update you've given me. And it was interesting to listen to different topics. And as you guys are discussing, you know, uh, that was a balance between diplomatic and patriotism. I think patriotism always wins, Damraj. I'm with you on that. Thank you,
Yes,
guys. It
sir.
was very interesting listening to you
Thank
guys.
you so much, sir, for your appreciation. But I would just like to ask you, how dare you? How dare you say anything against Nepal?
I've been
Okay.
listening, didn't I?
Indeed, indeed.
All right. Thank you, राजा भैया.
You are also Nepali
अरे
according
भाई
to
अबे
Uri.
रुक जा मेरे भाई रुक जा.
No, I respect the Gorkha regiment, sir. You can't do this.
अरे वो
I
बस
also
बस
respect.
बस. अरे रुको रुको. Karan bhai, anything to add? Final comments.
So I'll just say, as far as I can't see the title of the room because my phone is glitching. Um, but as far as the Quad is concerned, so this uh, Economic Framework Agreement (IPEF), which was signed, this constitutes 40% of the world's GDP in terms of the initial member nations. 40% of the world's GDP, and it it has the potential to be a strong counterbalance to China, especially many countries have got their hands burned dealing with China lately, and uh, I noticed, I saw this news just maybe 10 days ago. The US had given some I think $600 million line of credit to Nepal, um, or $600 million in aid, actually. Um, so we might actually be witnessing some sort of synchronicity between US's foreign policy and India's foreign policy. That being said, India's interests in Quad are entirely directed towards containing China. Um, we have built up our armed forces on the back of Soviet and Russian technology and hardware, and that's not something that we can just change in a few years. I mean, a lot of these systems are going to be with us for the next 15 years at least. Um, so we can't simply turn our backs on Russia, no matter what the situation dictates. We have to maintain a cordial relationship with Russia. So, but at the end of the day, America has to contain China. China is becoming more and more threatening each day. It's Most of America's institutions have been compromised by China politically, economically, not to the same extent, but yes, America is basically black hole in the economy. The trade deficit with China, it's more than 500 billion a year, and it's been going on for decades now. China's economy, China had double the trade deficit with the U.S. than they did with the entire continental Europe for the last so many years. Um, so at the end of the day, Democrats or not, Democrats are more soft towards China. They're more sympathetic because um, they they're getting a lot of cash in their wallets, um, thanks to the CCP. But eventually it is going to be an existential threat. uh, America cannot simply continue to turn a blind eye and fall into chaos, but if they continue to ignore China. So eventually they do have to stand up to China, and India is going to be the main counterbalance. If you look at the Quad, Japan is an extremely important partner of India. As far as the industrialization of India is concerned, Japan is a key partner. So Quad or no Quad, these two nations are going to be working closely. Um, Japan, as far as memory serves me, every time a Japanese prime minister has visited India, Japan has signed much more in terms of business and investment than whenever a U.S. president visits India. Um, so Japan is a key economic partner, a key development partner. Um, but yeah, I just I don't see the need for a lot of pessimism. This is a new framework. The U.S. they renamed their Eastern Pacific Command to the Indo Pacific Command just in 2018. This was just a few years ago. So U.S. policy is shifting. Um, they are looking at this region as a whole. They're looking at the importance of the Indian Ocean. There's more U.S. personnel in the Indo-Pacific than in any other region on Earth. So all I'm saying is that I don't think there's so much need for pessimism. We'll see in the coming years. I think 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, uh, once this organization, this Quad, has matured, I think it's going to become something much more sophisticated, much more potent. Uh, I'm not saying that China is the enemy, but what I am saying is that China is the enemy for the next 30 years. Until India has more economic parity with China, there's no room even talking to them. To be honest, it's just it leads to more trade deficit. They don't benefit India in any way. Um, so India should just turn a cold shoulder to China for the next 30 years. That's what I'm going to say. All these organizations like BRICS and SCO, they are useful, but mainly to maintain a cordiality with Russia. We can't. We are in no position to simply turn our backs to Russia at all. Um, so I wouldn't say that, oh, just focus on Quad and shun BRICS and SEO. Russia is going to be an important partner. So these frameworks are And Russia also has interest in containing China. As we all know, the uh, entire Siberia is kind of vulnerable to China. So it's in all nations' interest, and I think Quad, uh, like I said, there's just really no need for excessive pessimism. Just wait and watch, and see how this matures, see how things develop.
Right. Thank you so much, Karan bhai. If there are no more comments, I can finally give my final comments. And unlike the rest of the folks here, Ayush, except with the exception of Ayush, I will not be focusing on that Himalayan kingdom. Okay, so because there has been a lot of
Why
focus on
though?
it for no
Why?
reason. Look, Gamraj, the kingdom or the erstwhile region of Lumeria has been ignored. And as somebody who is supporting the Mool Nivasi sentiment, we should give some prior attention to them. Are Umesh sir, welcome. Umesh sir, any final comments?
Not to say anything. This is fine.
Oh, okay, fine. There was this. Acha, he left. This was an awkward moment.
My
Anyway,
चैट देख लग रहा है चैट देख लिया
yeah. Anyway, ये
Aquaman is my cousin.
final final comments. Okay, Sankey, you have anything to speak on the topic, or should we like just end it, or you're just here sitting? कुछ बोलना है आपको?
मुझसे पूछ-
भाई आपको ही कह रहे थे. I don't think he wishes to say anything. Anyway. Anyway, so final comments to this. Simple. Foreign policy and foreign interest dictates us to be in whatever way possible we are. That does not mean that we ignore realities. Yes, it's a difficult situation. The obvious framework of the Quad is something worth debating upon. And as Gamraj said, we will always be hawkish over its success rate. It has not been that successful. There has been a lot of posturing, but posturing does not yield results. Now, be that as it may, I am still willing to look forward if it helps us bilaterally with other nations, and it has an opportunity to do that. And as Ayush mentioned, we are centrally located in this area, so it goes without saying that we have a tremendous role in it, and the Indo-Pacific cannot be ignored without our presence. I think that was pretty clear when the Americans backed off from us by trying to pressurize us to take a tougher stance on Russia. So, long story short, I think this is an exciting time and also a very wonderfully critical time to also see the amount of promises that comes from the West. And with that, I think I would only add that any organization, or for that matter, any nation in that experience, is dictated with the kind of people that vote for it. So when Gamraj was talking about that particular nation and its people, he was not entirely wrong. And it is the same thing here. The organization which is Quad and also the IPEF will depend upon how serious their members are. It's a local to a supranational or transnational organizational setup approach, but it is there and it is frankly irritatingly still present. So if they are serious to counter the Chinese threat, it will work. If they are not, as the Americans still are not clear as to what to do, none of this would work, and this will be another failed or a lingering experiment which will be undoubtedly looking forward to reap our own benefit. But anyway, that's just the only opinion that I have for today. And also, a very, very small advice to all of you. If you get distracted by somebody or by any opinion, let's not completely flow to that place if the other person is not willing to listen to you. And of course, as it goes, Lumeria is an ignored piece of land. Please give 2 cents of attention to that area. Not everything is about Nepal. Thank you.
New Lemuristan is in Pakistan.
No, it is
That's where
not
all our
there. Do
ancestors
not,
came
do
from.
but
not make, don't say
but
that.
but Anandya, seriously, Nepal is a great concern.
I have
Please,
You
I
see,
have no I
yeah,
have no issues, no qualms with anybody even disagreeing on that front. पर भैया सांस तो ले लो यार सांस लेके बात
no,
करो
यार
we'll be
बस.
having
शा-
एक रूम लगाना है इस पे नेपाल पे रियली मतलब
हाँ भाई, गमराज, एसआर से तुम्हें करना है नेपाल एंड इंडो नेपाल रिलेशंस,
भाई
रिमेम्बर?
मेरा प्लान तो है, लेकिन मैं किताबें अपनी रख के चला आया हूँ, ठीक है।
Oh,
तो मेरे को थोड़ा सा, अगर मैं रेफर करूँगा भी, इफ आई रेफर टू इट ऑल्सो, देन आई विल बी रेफरिंग टू what do you call, very very low level like notes, you know. So,
still,
so
yeah.
That's okay. So we can
yeah,
do two
yeah.
rooms. The first room is on the low level notes, which will undoubtedly be successful. The other one could be you leading it from your books. So it's okay. ठीक है?
Let's see. Yeah, Nepal is a
हाँ.
very big topic, you know. So there are things that I get, you know,
Lillip-
wrong also. So
Lilliputians are too big to just
अरे
cover everything.
hey, no,
यार
no,
don't वो फिर कोई ऑफेंस
they're
नहीं लेना.
lion-hearted people. Bhai, replays are on, brother.
Please
Please.
understand. Anyway, Ayush
Yeah.
bhai, over to you.
Mhm. No, at last, what I would say is, though we covered the nitty-gritties of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and that was the basic idea between me, Piyush, and